Please be seated, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the August 27th meeting of Regina City Council. If I could have a motion to confirm the agenda with the additions from the clerk's office.
Thank you. I'll make that motion to confirm the agenda with the additions from the clerks.
Councilor Rice, seconder for, please. Councilor Young, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the last meeting of council, I have a motion to adopt those. Okay. Councilor Hawkins, Councilor Bresciani seconds that. Any errors, omissions, or comments on the motion on the minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move into delegations, advertised and public notice, bylaws, and related reports. We have a delegation on the Winnipeg Street proposed zoning amendment bylaw. John Pearson. Good afternoon, Mr. Pearson. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for a presentation.
My name is John.
Questions afterwards.
John Pearson. I'm with Shindico Realty. We're out of Winnipeg. We own the property at 221 Winnipeg Street. And as I submitted in my letter, I wasn't going to do a lengthy presentation, but I was going to reference the fact that we are rezoning from IB to IA, which is more service-oriented. Pardon me?
I think it's from here, the volume control. So that the gallery can hear you. We'll turn the volume up.
Okay.
Let's try that.
I wasn't going to do a lengthy presentation because the administration report was well documented. I presented the Planning Commission. I did do a presentation there, and it was very similar to the administrative report. So I'm going to let the administrative report stand on its own here. Other than to mention, we're going from IB to IA zoning for the purposes that are intended. Future of the building would be more service-oriented as opposed to manufacturing-oriented. So the IA category is more suitable to our intended use of the building going forward. And I think that's basically it, and I open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. There may be questions from members of council. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for taking some questions. Let's just review a little bit. I always want everybody who's watching to understand a little bit about what's going on. So first of all, the building we're talking about was at one time a SIAST campus?
That's correct.
And then it went into becoming a call center?
That's correct.
Can you talk about the situation with the call center right now and the status of the building as it sits?
Sure. Okay, so the building is about 137,000 square feet. SIASC was originally in the building. The building's the same size as when SIASC was in there, the same configuration of office and warehouse as when SIASC was in there. Staples occupied it in 2000. They occupied the entire building and as a call center, and they had warehouse components, et cetera, within the building.
So separate from this decision that we'll make today, in the report it indicates that the Ministry of Highways would come in and occupy part of the building. Could you talk about what portion and what they would do and how that might relate to, say, other clients that you might have in the future?
Sure. So part of the building that part of the question I didn't answer with your first question was where's Staples now? And yeah. Staples has retracted into a portion of the building, still the same function, still a call center. And recently we've leased a portion of it to Department of Highways. They have emergency, I'm trying to remember the name of the how they refer to it. It's their 24/7 call line. It's an emergency call line.
It's a hotline.
Hotline. There, that's the word. The hotline, and they've got other emergency services, compound for vehicles, etc., in the building, and they're our initial occupant to the property.
Thanks. Could you just comment a little bit about how much parking is there and about compound space?
We've got about 732 parking stalls on the property, and we also have about a 58,000 square foot compound that could contain emergency vehicles and highways vehicles and that kind of stuff.
So is access to the ring road and ultimately the highway and the bypass important to this structure?
Critically important to several occupants that we're in discussion with, but in particular the highways group, because they need immediate and fast access to the highway system to provide emergency services. They have all the bypass details are on screens in the facility, and so they can watch and monitor the conditions and be able to react promptly to those situations.
Thank you. Last question. Based on the amount of parking space, room that you have for vehicles, based on the amount of compound space you potentially have, would this be the type of businesses that might not seek a downtown location or other central core areas?
That's correct. We're pursuing occupants that need compound, need extensive parking, need warehouse space, need things that you can't get in the downtown core.
Good, thanks, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions of the delegation? I have one just for clarity purposes related to the amount of office space that will be occupied. Can you tell me a bit about how much office space will be used?
Well, the total building, like I said before, was about 137,000 square feet. About 60% of that building could be considered office space, although much of it's being used for call center and other uses besides pure office space. And about 40% is warehouse.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Councillor Flagel, yes?
And that's been, and I'm sorry, and that's been like that since day one from SIASC.
Yes.
With no new office space was added when Staples went in 2000, and we're not proposing to change that.
Okay. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks for coming forward. What does Staples, what do they take now of that 137?
They're in about 21,000 square feet. right now.
21,000. How much would the Department of Highways consume? Like today, if, I mean, maybe they'll grow with it.
The first tranche that we're working with them on is about 32,000 square feet.
Would that take over all the stuff that's on Park Street, or is that,
That's Park Street, that is the Park Street group, yes,
that's about what you need? So,
which was not in the downtown. It
so you
was
got about a
suburban.
third leased out
Correct.
between Highways and Staples?
In
roughly.
rough numbers, yes.
Rough number, yeah.
Correct.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what other, you say other ones that need that kind of compound? Is it mostly government or is it private?
Well, I wish I could be really specific, but
Yeah,
then I'm breaching confidentiality.
Sure, no,
But I can
absolutely.
describe it in
No.
generalities. I happen to have a government group right now looking for 100 parking stalls, and our new zoning would allow us to accommodate them. It's short-term,
Okay.
and it would be a group that's near and dear to your heart here.
Okay,
And that's one example. We've also got other government agencies that are, I'm not sure whether they fall provincially. Some of them are city.
okay,
There's a large city group that's pretty serious about taking
Good.
positioning. There's some federally related groups, but there's also private and nonprofit organizations, all which fall into the kind of emergency service direction. So that's kind of how I
Awesome.
would just summarize it.
appreciate it, that's all I need to hear, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel.
One of the key reasons is that we've got 24-hour uninterrupted power. We have a diesel generator with a UPS battery backup system. So the battery backup system alone can run the building for 5 minutes, but just gives time for the diesel generator to kick in. And that's what all these emergency service related groups, and there's several of them, there's like 5 or 6 that we're working with, all want that.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce, for that. There are no other questions. You can return to the gallery, and I'll ask for a motion to receive and file the communication CP 18-11 from the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. Councillor Flagel, you move it. Seconder, please. Councillor Massanelli. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll move on to report 81, which is the issue on the light industrial zone at Winnipeg Street. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you very much. Could I have a second? I'll speak to this.
Second floor, please. Councillor Massanelli again.
So the request is to amend the application of rezoning from 1B, which is a medium industrial zone, to a 1A light industrial. The address is 221 North Winnipeg Street. I'm going to begin with an amendment. I hope that all of council has this before them. And it's just a change in the description of the property. And do I need to read that, or does the clerk have that on?
Do you have that, Madam Clerk?
Zone
Yes, it's
parcel
already
fee-
here. It's already.
So it's already up there?
Yes.
So
so
maybe
A
I'll.
friendly amendment.
Oh, just
I'll
friendly?
take it
Okay,
as a
good.
friendly. It's a legal requirement to clarify.
Good, okay. So thanks very much. So the building, as you understood from the delegation, what it was and what it could be, the ability for highways to move in there is separate from this, but I think it's useful information so that you understand what what the uses of the building could be. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions of the administration to clarify. So by changing the zoning, what would this allow the proponent to get?
Ms. Falk?
Through you, your worship, the zoning amendment is changing from industrial medium to industrial light, and the intent is to ensure that the building is able to be repurposed for service-oriented and fewer manufacturing uses that are typically seen closer to residential development.
Okay, and so the question was asked about, and how this might relate to our downtown plan.
Right.
And about office development, if you could comment on that, please.
Right.
Falk?
Through you, your worship, as the applicant has indicated, the development would be more suited outside of the downtown. It is industrial uses predominantly. We have received a development permit for uses that would include accommodating the highways hotline, as well as monitoring for the Regina bypass. In addition to that, highways is looking to relocate their commercial vehicle enforcement team that provides enforcement throughout the province at that location. So the proximity to the ring road is very key to that, as well as ensuring their emergency response team is there. So most of this use is classified as warehouse.
Good, thanks very much. So in our discussion of planning commission, we kind of took a look at this building, what it was and what it could be, its location, and we felt that this was appropriate and that the rezoning would be okay. So we seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell, for that. Other questions or comments on this report? I have one for clarification from my perspective. I might have missed this, but with respect to the vacant office space in the current building, the current configuration, if at any time the applicant wishes to add office space in that area, would they require administration or council approval to do that, or is it a permitted use? Ms. Folk?
Through your worship, we've communicated with the applicant that any future development permit applications would need to be assessed based on what the use is against our regulations in the zoning bylaw and the OCP at the time. In terms of office use within the IA zone, industrial office is a permitted use, but again, that would be very focused on industrial use. In terms of general office, that is a discretionary use application, so that would come before Planning Commission and Council.
So in order for this, even if it's office space for industrial usage, we would be aware of that in any case. Even if it's a permitted use, we would be aware of what would be going in there. Ms. Folk?
Through your worship, we'd be monitoring that as the development permit comes in. If it's a permitted use and it meets all of our regulations, we would issue that permit.
Good, thank you very much for that. Other discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Fundera?
Your worship, I will declare conflict on the CR 1882. I'm involved with the Larry Group of companies, and I would like to request if we could separate the bylaws, do the 43, so then I'll stay out for the 2.
Yes.
I'll come back for the other 2, if that's
We will-
possible.
We will do that, yes, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Fundera.
Thank you.
We'll wait for Councillor Fundera to leave the room. So we'll now proceed to report 82, which is an application for partial street closure and undeveloped right-of-way. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Second for, please. Councillor Young.
Thank you. So the address is 1055 Broad Street. The proponent here actually is the City of Regina Real Estate Branch, and there is some land that is surrounding what is going to become a new car dealership. It's right across from the old Sears warehouse there. And this land is not needed by the city, but it can be used by the owner of that property to develop the car dealership on its full. And we saw no problem with this and would seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Any discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have a city manager's report, I guess, for Councillor Fedora to come back in. He'll have to leave again in a moment, but he should be here for this report.
Don't have to do this one yet. Just stand there, John.
You'll be in and out. Okay, next report is City Manager's Report, Report 18-13, which is really administrative, it's a clarification. Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks. So this is, maybe I'll ask for a second. and
Second
I'll speak
report,
to it.
please. Councillor Massanelli?
So there's a description here that was in error. It is changing a legal description so that it is accurate. It's simply that change. Would seek concurrence, please.
Housekeeping, that's
Yep.
correct. Discussion on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we will move to the bylaws, but I'll break them out in this fashion. Report 41 or bylaw 41 is third reading only. And then Councillor Verdure, you can step away. We will do the other two and then you'll come back for the other two, okay? So I'll give the floor to Councillor Stevens.
Chair, I move seconded by Councillor Bresciani that bylaw 2018-41 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. So let's move on to bylaws 45 and 46. Councillor Verdure, you can stay there for that, and then we'll go back to 43 after. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Through the chair, I move seconded by Councillor Mancinelli that bylaws 2018-45 and 2018-46 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has reviewed the associated reports and will now consider the following related bylaws. 218-45 respecting the proposed rezoning to facilitate the redevelopment of the existing property at 221 North Winnipeg Street, and 218-46 respecting the proposed closure to allow for the closure and sale of a portion of North Railway Street. If there's anyone in the gallery this evening that would like to address council on either of these matters, I would ask you to indicate your interest at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call vote on third reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Stevens.
I move seconded by Councillor Bryce that bylaws 2018-45 and 2018-46 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move seconded by Councillor Murray that council hereby consents to bylaws 2018-45 and 2018-46 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you. I move seconded by Councillor Bresciani that bylaws 2018-45 and 2018-46 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So Councillor Fendura, for the record, you would state why you're leaving on the bylaw?
Okay. I'm involved with Dilawri Automotive Group, so declare a conflict on that.
Thank you very much
you.
for that. Okay. Councillor Stevens.
Through the chair, I move seconded by Councillor Young that bylaw 2018-43 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider bylaw 218-43 respecting their proposed closure to allow for the sale of a portion of the right-of-way adjacent to 1055 Broad Street. Again, if there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council this evening on this matter, I would ask that you indicate your interest at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call a vote on the first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I move seconded by Councillor O'Donnell that bylaw 2018-43 be read a second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2018-43 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2018-43 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. We will now move into delegations and related reports and motions. First delegation is Anthony Cameron. I gather they're just here for questions. So does anyone, with relations to the proposed house form in commercial residential building in the transition area, are there any questions of the delegation at all, or potential delegation? Representative. Okay, we'll move on to the report itself then. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. The address is 2119 Lawrence Street. If I could have a seconder, please.
Councillor Hawkins.
This is a discretionary use application, and this is a house form, commercial, that is proposed. And the nature of the business is a travel agency. Parking works here. There are certainly a number of these types of businesses in this area, and we had no problem with this. Seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Any speakers to the report? Pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to our next report with respect to landscaping regulations. Stu Niebergall. Good evening, Mr. Niebergall. You've been here before. You know the rules. 5 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions afterwards. And for the record, if you could state who you are and who you represent.
Great, thank you. My name is Stu Niebergall, the President and CEO of the Regina and Region Home Builders Association. We very much appreciate Councillor Hawkins' intention and his request in this motion that the RHABA be consulted in the process. Like City Council, our association has heard concerns on occasion related to new homes not being landscaped. On the surface, it may sound reasonable to regulate front yard landscapes, but as you dig deeper, there is complexity that would need to be addressed to regulate successfully. While the city would be considering researching and creating regulations, most community developers have implemented front yard landscaping through builder agreements in their new and upcoming neighborhoods. This will resolve many of the concerns in the future. Developments like Harbor Landing and the Greens on Gardner, which is where we have received a few complaints, are at the end stages of development. In my submission, I highlighted several items we needed to consider. To mention just a few, many newcomers are learning what to do with a yard for the first time. People want to make choices that enhance their own curb appeal, and the long-term health of landscaping is best completed 1 to 2 years after construction. It would be rare to find 2 identical front yards in Regina. The variety makes a walk through a neighborhood more interesting. When you require some sort of minimal standard, we will see more mundane sameness in the look of front yards. A regulated front landscaping regulation will ultimately lead to a bureaucratic view of what is appropriate and what is not. And I can provide examples of this. We live in a 4-season city. This can create significant obstacles and costs to families moving into a new home if they were denied occupancy because there is 2 feet of snow and the city has not inspected the landscaping. The city already has a bylaw to address overgrowth of weeds in front yards. Maybe the best solution is the City of Regina to enforce the bylaws it already has in place. Enforcement will create higher costs to the homeowner and City of Regina. Minimum and maximum specs will need to be developed by the City of Regina along with acceptable and reasonable timeframes, which is very subjective. More resources will be needed to review landscaping plans, provide inspections, and in some cases, re-inspections. You already have an overstrained administration that will only increase red tape and add even more delays to an already burdensome process. Alternatively, the City of Regina could partner with our association to develop a best practice guide for being a good neighbor. I outlined an example in my submission from the City of Calgary. In conclusion, we are very interested in continuing this conversation on how to reach a better outcome. At the same time, we would discourage the city from creating compliance that consumes significant time and resources from our industry and the municipality to address the few exceptions in the market. As I approach 10 years in this role, I have come to the conclusion when it comes to new housing, everyone is a critic. I often hear people complain about housing they will never live in, is too dense, too expensive, generates too much traffic. Housing which they will barely look at is not architecturally appealing or appropriate for the neighborhood, and I could go on and on. Contrary to popular belief, most people are strongly in favor of heavy-handed and draconian government regulations of private property, as long as it's someone else's private property and not their own. The fact is, most new homeowners in Regina complete their front yard landscaping in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Niebergall, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Niebergall. Can you tell us a little bit about what the effect of having weed-infested lots, empty weed-infested lots, what the effect of that is on the ability of developers to sell lots in a subdivision and the ability of homeowners to sell their houses if they wish to sell them?
Well, this is certainly could be a very real concern, and we can certainly appreciate, on occasion, we have seen some of those concerns come in from neighbors, and I think that's why you see the majority of the industry, places like Westera, developments like Eastbrook, and so forth, some of that I mentioned in the report, have actually gone to these requirements within their own subdivision themselves. At the same time, as I say, if it is that the issue is about weeds, on this property, there's already a bylaw in place. And again, we feel the best alternative to manage this particular issue is to enforce the bylaw that's already in place, as opposed to creating a regulatory framework and all the complexity that will go along with that to address that problem. It feels at times it's a little bit of a hammer, when a chisel might do the trick. I'm not sure if that's a good analogy or not. Might be a terrible analogy, but you get my point.
Given that a number of your members, you indicate quite a few of your members, are voluntarily adopting this kind of approach, would there be any problem in standardizing that so that those recalcitrant members who are not adopting voluntary guidelines will be brought into conformity with your members who do have voluntary guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think in concept, this is very well intended and seems very appropriate. As we look at other examples in other communities around, and I just returned from the city of Bakersfield, California, which has had this kind of policy in place for about 10 years. And a relative is a builder within that marketplace. And I shared, while we were down there, what I'm working on as I was responding in our submission to this. And they're a very good example. The regulation starts off well-intended like this. But very quickly, what their experience was, now people weren't complaining about weeds, now they were complaining about the type of landscaping, if the minimum requirements are appropriate. And it has escalated and escalated. And today, 10 years later in Bakersfield, of course, the municipality has looked at this and said, well, if we're going this far, now we need to have some sort of sustainable local plant vegetation, et cetera, et cetera. At some point here, what you see in Bakersfield when you go to a new development, every single yard looks exactly the same. And I shared some pictures with Diana Hallrick earlier this year on that, and I shared them with one of the councillors today, just within the hallway when we bumped into each other. And so again, I think the industry, for the most part, is going to regulate this itself. And save the burden of this ending up on the the municipality. Again, there is a tool you already have in place if the issues of weeds, and maybe again the solution to this is the city enforcing that particular bylaw on weed control.
You mentioned that we have bylaws, and you mentioned perhaps fairly, that we sometimes have difficulty enforcing all of our bylaws. Would your membership be in favor of a somewhat increase in property taxes so that we can afford to better enforce our bylaws?
Well, as a general rule, and as a general perspective, no, I think generally we wouldn't, we would be supportive of whatever mechanism is going to work. I have often said to many of you in council, both privately and here, that, we recognize that a whole lot of our challenges that we face within our community to really provide a fantastic community is the fact that municipalities aren't charging enough taxes to take care of some of their challenge, and that's a nationwide problem.
Thank you very much. I'm sure the Chief Financial Officer has taken note of that as we
Yeah.
come close to the budget. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We do have other speakers. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks, welcome back, Stu. Nice to see you. How many members do you have in your association?
Right now, we're about 260.
260?
Yeah.
You made a comment that some of the members are on board. How many of those 260 are on board?
Yeah, this came to me, this issue came to me like literally days before I went on vacation. And so we're responding quite quickly to that. So we just very simply polled our members. I would say about 20% of those who responded, mostly in terms of members who responded, it's mostly going to be builders and builders and developers. So I don't want that confused with sub-trades and that, because that's a much smaller group within our membership. And as they were, I'd say about 20% of them thought that was a reasonable request.
20 of the 20?
20% of our builder and developer group who responded to our survey on this. When you actually look at who they responded, a lot of that experience are people who have traveled or vacation lots or own property down in Phoenix. And down in Phoenix, this is very, very common. But one of the key differences down in the Phoenix market is they've got HMOs, to manage this whole process. So you've bought into that whole concept before you ever moved into that new neighborhood. And it's not the municipality regulating it. It again is it's the HMO that is regulating that behavior.
I need to clarify through you, Mr. Mayor. So 260 members.
Yeah.
20% of them responded.
No, about 50, we've got about 50 builders.
Okay.
And about 5 developers. And out of them, we probably got about 20 responses. And out of that 20 responses, we probably had about 4 that was in support. I'm just doing the rough math
Okay,
in
so
my head.
four people supported it out of 50, roughly.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's pretty minute number.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I agree with you on the Arizona thing. The other thing, I'm glad you brought up Bakersfield because that was sort of my next question to you. Where do we stop? If we want landscaping done, now we're gonna say, do we want concrete, aggregate, inlay brick, asphalt, rubber? Where do we stop with making sure that we now go to like an Arizona look? And do we want an Arizona?
This is actually a rhetorical question, Councilor, you know that? And
Yes,
you're
but it's a
beginning-
question to him. I'm
you're
asking
beginning
him
a bit of
where.
a debate, so.
No, it's not a debate at all.
And actually it is, and I'll allow you to answer this question, but not continue the line of questioning.
Okay,
Yeah, this is my point. This starts off well-intended, but this is where it leads to.
yes,
Yeah.
that's what I was
So I
trying to
don't know,
get
I
at.
don't know where the limit is. That's where city
Yeah.
council would decide that.
Yeah. Do you think that in the general scheme of things, in terms of landscaping, that the smaller lots that we've now gone to, the 25-foot lots, the 28-foot lots, has that helped it or hurt it, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know. What I do know is people in this city take a lot of pride in their lots. A good example of that, a friend of mine built new in one of the last lots available in Windsor Park, and it's not a 28-foot lot. It's a larger lot. And as he said to me, he's put $15,000 into his front lot, and it's beautiful. And as he said to me, you know what, if the builder had done that, I know they would have put $1,500 to $2,000 into that front lot, and it would have been at the most minimal standard at all. And I wouldn't have done anything to it, because it was already done.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Councilor Massanelli.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming out, Mr. Niederball. I noticed that I'm not actually voting on a bylaw here. When you first started your presentation, you mentioned maybe a little bit too authoritative approach would cause problems more than help. What we're considering here is coming up with a plan to address the problem, and I noticed in the process of the plan that it calls on consulting you and your organization part of the planning process. I don't see this as constituting a bylaw in the end. I hope this will frame up the regulations some of your members have already enforced, and even things like the little homeowner booklet you cite in your supposition there. I'm going to support this because I think both sides are right, and this isn't a bad idea.
Fair enough.
Councilor Bryce, you're next.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify, in your submission, you put that you prefer the bylaw enforcement angle, but you also said in your submission that developers are already taking care of this issue, but you also said you don't agree with that because it ends up being a boring type neighborhood if that happens. So if you could just clarify all of that?
Yeah, that's a very fair point, and it is the complexity of this issue. And I think the issue when a development, and I will use an example, very clear to the city itself. The city's own land, the towns, doesn't have this requirement. The city, Eastbrook, which is being developed by Dream, does have this requirement. They are making market decisions on what is best and how they see best to sell their land. The towns may take the perspective that this is providing them a competitive advantage because that may reduce ultimately the cost of that lot, because somebody's got to pay for that in advance, right? Dream may be taking the approach that this makes our neighborhood more attractive than the other. And so individual developers are making those decisions all the time within the marketplace. And that's how we think of this, a market should work.
Thank you for that. Do you agree if you were living next door to a few people who had undeveloped landscaping, so it's dirt, other than weeds or not, but every time it rains, or every time you get weather of any sorts, that mud ends up all over everywhere. Would you have an issue, and bylaw couldn't do anything about that, so how would you resolve that problem if those were your neighbors, or would you just live with it?
Yeah, I guess, I wouldn't be happy with that. I've got two neighbors myself right now, and they do things I don't necessarily enjoy. One of them put a hot tub and every weekend cooks turkeys in a big boiling pot all summer long, and I got to smell that in my backyard. I mean, we put up with neighbors' things. Some things we like, some things we don't. This would be one of those items. Again, it would be good neighbors to sort these items out. But it's a very different thing when you start to regulate that as a municipality. That is taking a lot of those choices away from people. Now, if I took off my RHABA hat for a moment and thought about how I would personally resolve this particular issue, I think this one's actually pretty easy schmeezy on that. I think actually very simply, if the city looked at the occupancy permit, I suggested earlier that there's 1 to 2 years after construction that landscaping is best done and takes hold. If you guys looked at your occupancy permit, gave people, say, 3 years or 4 years, whatever time frame, to get their landscaping done within that particular time, and if they didn't accomplish it within that time, you went after the property owner to get the landscaping done, that probably wouldn't seem crazy to our industry, as opposed to trying to regulate the industry on something that we will have difficulties trying to control.
Thank you for that. I thought you were going to say I would call my city councilor and complain, but.
Yeah.
But, so I'm glad you came up with that. So what I'm hearing from you basically today is that if we did look at what's in front of us today that says that we want to work with industry
Yep.
and have public input as well as your own input from your, as a representative, you would be willing to have that conversation and move forward with however, whether it be a 4-year thing or whether it be something that's part of the development, that's something that you would have input for, is that correct?
Yeah, I think a good way to look at today, going back to Councillor Massanelli's point and your own point, Councillor Bryce, I mean, speaking here today is probably a little bit premature than has historically been our role, but this is a really good way today to get an early info piece on where our industry is generally going to stand on this issue as we move forward. Our nervousness is in an already complex process that can be burdensome and an administration that is challenged to get all of our priorities accomplished at times, that besides some of the regulatory perspectives here, but this is an item that's just going to take more resources away getting some other issues resolved as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Worship. Am I on? My first question actually just is for the mover of the motion, and it would be possibly a friendly amendment.
So we'll get to the motion first. We're still in delegations.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you want to hold that till we get to actual motion
Yeah, no
itself.
problem. Yeah, I mixed that up. Sorry about that.
No
Thanks.
problem. Any other questions of the delegation? Thank you, Mr.
Great.
Niebergall. You
Thank you.
can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at the landscaping regulations motion. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This is not a motion that proposes any solutions. This is a motion that recognizes that in places like Harbor Landing and some of the other subdivisions in the city, we have a real problem. And it's a problem that's manifested itself this summer. We've got people eating weeds 3 and 4 feet high. We've had numerous people phoning in and saying, you've got to help us out. This is a major issue, certainly in Harbor Landing, which I represent, and I know in some other subdivisions as well. So what I've done is I brought forward here a motion that says to the administration, will you please look at this? Will you please explore all possible options and bring us back a report by December so that we can do something about this for next year? I'll need a seconder, Your Worship.
Seconder, Councillor Bryce seconds that.
Thank you very much. And so we're asking that a problem which the people of the city have felt very keenly this summer be looked at. Now, in terms of options, all suggestions, and Mr. Niebergall has interesting suggestions, are welcome. I'm sure the administration wants to hear them all when it's developing its report. And the range of suggestions will run from the city adopting a bylaw regime and enforcing it. And I'm sure nobody wants a heavy-handed regime like the kind that Mr. Niebergall seems worried about, all the way to an industry-enforced set of norms that they've already started to adopt, and some companies have already started to adopt. So this is a motion that addresses a problem. It recognizes the problem of weeds is there, and it asks the administration, can you please bring us some solutions to this moving forward? I'd ask for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We do have speakers. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize about mixing that up. Through Your Worship, my first question just for Councillor Hawkins on a possible friendly amendment to include in Resolution 1 infill and brownfield development as well. I know this is specifically around greenfield, but this is also an issue on lengthy projects that happen for infield development as well. So I was just wondering what your thoughts on that.
Your Worship, I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment. I don't mean for this motion to be restrictive in any way. I simply mean that we should get on the table some solutions from the administration to a serious problem about weeds.
Okay, great.
Councillor Bryce, are you seconding the motion? Are you okay with the friendly amendment? Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Murray. I'm not seeing, okay. Councillor Brashian, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too rise in support of this motion, and I thank Councillor Hawkins for bringing it forward. The weeds, I can speak from my area, Greens on Gardner. I have had many complaints from residents in that area, And there seems to be not enough bylaw staff to go out there to actually enforce it. I mean, you could drive a little car in there and get lost in the weeds at times. So I too rise in support, and I also, I agree with Councillor Murray in bringing in the infill. I'd like to see this as a city, to take a look at the whole city of how we care about our properties. And how does our neighbor care and how do we care? So I think those are big, big things. I'm glad that administration is going to bring back options to see how we can do this in the most effective manner. And of course, working with the builders as well. So again, thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am totally in favor of this. And I would like to ask a question of bylaw enforcement if I could. I would like to know what they can do now under our property standards bylaw when there is a yard full of weeds that has never been landscaped.
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship. So the current process is usually through a service request that comes in from a disgruntled neighbor. We send bylaw enforcement to the property. They give the property owner 5 days notice. If the property owner does not comply with the notice, they then move forward with an order to comply, which adds an additional 5 days. Within that 5-day period, the city will initiate action to send someone to the property to deal with the weed issue. That usually, right now, the average for that is around 12 days to have that work done, 12 to 14 days. We do not prosecute this work if it's conducted by the city or by a third party. The cost of that work is added to the property tax bill.
Okay. And when you say having to fix the property, if there are weeds, they have to be low to the ground or a certain height. They just can't be above a certain height. Is that correct?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, I'll ask Chief Jackson to add some detail to that.
Chief Jackson, please.
So that is the process, so they'll be cut close to the ground.
Close to the ground. Thank you. So that doesn't take care of the type of yard, and the weeds grow back again. So bylaw enforcement on property standards is not the solution to this problem. So I am in support of this report coming back so that we can look at all of the possibilities. Ward 1 has quite a few rentals because it's close to the university. And I have found that I get a lot of calls because the rentals are not taken care of. And bylaw enforcement can only do so much.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Massanelli.
Hi, just a quick question of administration. What is the height of the weeds that triggers infraction of bylaw? How high do they have to be? And how bad is bad before they do something?
Mr. Onright.
Through your worship, I'll ask Chief Jackson to comment.
Chief Jackson.
2 feet.
Through you, your worship, the weeds, it's just a fact that the weeds exist and then they'll be cut down. So the height level is, if there's noxious weeds determined, they're cut.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Couple of things. Through planning and all the other years that we've been doing this, we've always tried to get away from cookie cutter houses. We're not going to have cookie cutter lawns because the developers are going to put in what they want, and it's all going to look the same, like Mr. Niebergall was saying about Arizona. So that's my first point. I don't have a problem with the weed issue, but I have two concerns about the weed issue. One, the process to get those weeds cut is not fast enough. And two, and this is just a comment that just came to me, we have the chief of fire talking to us about weed control. That doesn't make sense. Unless there's a fire going on in those weeds, why is our chief looking after weeds? That's another
He
comment.
deals with bylaw enforcement. That's part of his portfolio.
Bylaw enforcement, I get, because there could be fire hazards. So the enforcement, of the weeds is one thing. The other issue, and this is something for the mover to think about, is we're talking about unsightly, we're talking about yards that are not there. But what about the developers? And we've had this issue going on in new developments forever. The developers and the insulation bags blowing around the city. The developers and the pieces of wood floating around the city. That's as big a concern in the new areas and the new developments in Harbor Landing and in Eastgate and wherever in my area, Lake Ridge Addition at the time. Those are also issues that we got to deal with. When you even look at when people do infill houses in different areas, and you go around, you ask the people, there's insulation bags all over the place. So the developers. Now the biggest one, and you can talk to people that live in Edgewater and other areas, is the trucks going in and out of the vacant lot.
Councillor Flagel, I know these are big issues, they're important issues.
But this could be part of his motion to clean it up.
You direct the question because you're actually off
I
topic.
have asked him.
It is about landscaping, so
This
if
is-
the mover wants to add that to his motion, I'll ask him to do that, but having a continual conversation about garbage around, these are important issues, but that's not the subject of the motion before us. Councillor Hawkins,
I know, but I wasn't finished because I wanted to, I said to the mover if he would consider these.
Okay.
And what I'm asking is that also, that we look at, and it's as big a problem as the weeds, is when we have the trucks going in and out of the dirt and taking that dirt onto the street, and then the city is responsible for cleaning it up.
Okay, well,
It's
ask
another
the
cleanup.
question, then we'll
Sure.
go from there. Councillor Hawkins.
Your worship, I'm concerned, I've asked in the motion that a report come back for December, and if we load it up too deeply with too many concerns, that'll be impossible. So I'm wondering if a better solution might be to take the very real issue, important issue that Councillor Flagel has raised. The city manager has heard this discussion. I'm wondering if he could just take it under advisement and perhaps advise us how we might deal with the problem of dirt spread by construction trucks in the subdivision, so that we don't have to amend the amendment.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'm good for now. The other question I have is, through the motion, is it more, are we looking to go after everybody about this, or just the builders? Because what about existing people like last year that built a house and still haven't done their yard? Are we gonna force them? This is what I'm trying to find out. Are we gonna force the present landowners, homeowners, to do what we are trying to set out to have the builders do to catch up? Are we talking just future?
I wonder, your worship, again, I haven't included that or not included that, but that is something that relates to landscaping. And again, perhaps when the administration is preparing its report, it can turn its mind to that question if it has sufficient time to do so.
Thanks, Mr. City Manager.
Through your worship, just a couple of points of clarification. So first of all, the fire chief is our director of fire and protective services. So he does have responsibility for bylaw. He does have responsibility for emergency planning, emergency preparedness, and of course, the fire department. So he has more roles than just being concerned with fire. Some of the issues you've raised, Councillor Flagel, do get addressed through the building permits that we issue. So there is a review of some of the items that you've raised, and we do, interact with developers on a regular basis to address some of those concerns. So we're well aware of those, and through Ms. Folk's department, we do try and stay on top of those and have the communications. So we wouldn't include it as a part of the report that's being proposed this evening. The other comment, if I can, because I'm standing up, just the time frame. So I understand the intent is let's have a report and let's get this in place so it can be addressed for next season. With all the other priorities and the pressures that we have in terms of preparing budget for 2019, I would ask that we be allowed, or council consider the fact that we bring the report by Q1 of 2019, and that we bring the implementation by Q3 of 2019.
Councillor Hawkins?
I'm good.
Your worship, Q3 by 2019 puts it outside of the summer season. When I developed this motion, I consulted with Ms. Harlock, and she suggested the Q4 this year date. I'm concerned that we not leave it to Q3 2019 because the problem is sufficiently critical that I think something has to be done for next summer.
Okay. Councillor Stevens, you're next.
Thank you. I live in an old house. My front lawn is mostly dirt and dead grass, so I'm pleased not to be in a subdivision if that's the focus of this motion. I am nonetheless supportive, but I had a question for Councillor Hawkins in terms of the intention. And Stu actually raised this in his report, specific to we don't really want uniformity, we want diversity. There are some property owners who want landscapes that are minimal effort and don't consume a lot of water. So in your imagination, in terms of how this is crafted, and specifically the use of soft landing, this could feasibly include rock beds and things that are actually are the lack of vegetation entirely. Is that correct?
Councillor Hawkins?
Your Worship, that is correct. I would say this, I'm pleased this is the first time the subject of weed has come up this summer that Councillor Stevens and I are in agreement on. The second thing is I'm old enough that I remember somewhere in the back of my head a folk song about tiny little houses all made out of ticky-tacky, all looking just the same. That's not what we want. Councillor Stevens is exactly right. This is a minimal landscaping thing. The intention is not to impose high-level, uniform-looking regulations on everyone. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens, are you finished?
That's it.
Okay. Any other speakers to the report? Or to the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Do you against? No, it's not unanimous. Councillor Flagel is against that. Okay. We'll move on to our next series of delegations. We have 10 delegations related to protect Wascana Park from commercial development. Our first delegation is Rob Humphreys. Mr. Humphreys, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
My name's Rob Humphreys, and I would like to speak to support the motion to protect Wascana Park from commercial development. I've been a resident in what is now Ward 9 for 40 years and a citizen of Regina for 60 years. I believe this is a serious issue. Therefore, tonight I present for the first time at a City Council meeting. I speak not only for myself, but on behalf of my 3 children, their spouses, my 3 grandchildren, and the vast majority of residents in Ward 9 whom I've spoken to. I want to commend Councillors Hawkins, Bershani, and Stevens for bringing such a principled and vital motion before City Council. It took foresight and courage on their part to introduce a motion protecting the jewel of the prairies, Regina's most cherished, valued, and enjoyed public space for residents, visitors, and tourists alike. This motion, I believe, embodies and reinforces the 5 key purposes for development as set out in the 1997 and 2016 master plans. Those purposes are development of the seat of government, enlargement of educational opportunities, advancement of the cultural arts, improved recreational facilities, and the conservation of the environment. The overriding message and intent being to protect the park from commercial development. The approval of the 80,000 square foot Connexus commercial building proposal circumvented all the above protections, as well as violated the intent of the Regina downtown development and official community plans. This set a dangerous precedent, allowing the Provincial Capital Commission to approve the even more disingenuous, secretive, and destructive Brant Industries 70,000 square foot commercial building proposal on the CNIB site. This motion will make it clear to developers and the provincial government alike that the City of Regina's official position is to restrict future commercial development in Wascana Park. As stated in the motion, the City of Regina has ample vacant commercial space in the downtown corridor. All commercial development should be restricted to areas stipulated in the official downtown development plan. The motion also speaks to the future governance of Wascana Park, in which I believe the city must be an equal partner. In 2017, following the dissolution of the Wascana Centre Authority and its replacement by the Provincial Capital Commission, the PCC, the city and the U of R effectively lost their equal voice on future developments within Wascana Park. It appears the PCC does not share the concerns detailed in the 1987 master plan and the plebiscite held the same year, which made it clear the residents of Regina want to restrict overdevelopment in the park. This motion will hopefully send a clear message to the PCC that the City of Regina wants to be an equal partner in any future proposals affecting the development, stewardship, and governance of Wascana Park. The events dating back to 2016 and leading to this motion I find exceptionally disturbing for a number of reasons. One, I have always been a proponent and supporter of the U of R, my wife and 3 children all having received degrees from the university. I've been a proud member of Connexus for over 40 years and believe they truly upheld community values. I trusted the city was committed to conducting business in accordance with their official community, neighborhood, and downtown development plans, all of which are totally contrary to the commercialization of Wascana Park. The trust and support I felt for these institutions was betrayed and lost the moment the deal was consummated to open the park to the precedent, and I can't emphasize enough, the precedent-setting Connexus head office building. I would challenge each of you to ask yourself the following 3 questions when discerning how you will vote tonight. If City Council would have given the citizens of Regina an opportunity to vote on the Connexus and/or Brandt proposals, do you think the results would have been any different than the plebiscite of 1987?
Mr. Humphries, you have about 30 seconds left in your time.
Where would you take your family to enjoy a beautiful Sunday afternoon? Would you choose to take them to a financial institution like Connexus or our beautiful Wascana Park? As a tourist, would you want to spend the day touring an implement manufacturing office building like Brandt, or spend it in what we advertise as the jewel of the prairies? I honestly believe if we don't take a strong stand now, we are on the verge of losing our precious park piece by piece until it is not recognizable in its present beauty. Approving this motion tonight will clearly show our city is committed to taking a principled stand in defense of its core values, respecting the preservation and good governance of Wascana Park.
Your time's up.
Fine, thank you.
So I'd like to respectfully ask the delegation or to the gallery to please not participate in the debate. So please, no clapping if you don't mind. That's the rules of City Council. I know this is a passionate issue. We all share it. Even members of council here share the same passion. But I ask you please to respect the rules. Any questions of the delegation, please? Councilor Massanelli?
I don't have any questions. I just want to take a moment to say thanks. I've
You have
written
to
all the
question
letters.
only to delegations, only questions.
Okay. Thank you for all your letters. I've taken your information in.
Thank you.
We're restricted to questions with delegations, Councilor Massanelli. There are no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move to the next delegation is Lorraine Widener. Could you identify yourself for the record, who you represent, and you as well have 5 minutes for your presentation.
My name is Lorraine Widener. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm here to support the motion, Protect Wascana Park from Commercial Development. Reginans have a deep love for Wascana Park. It is a park for everyone, every taste, biking, walking, jogging, swimming, sunbathing, picnicking, ball and frisbee throwing. The list goes on. Even newlyweds use it for their wedding photographs. Commercial development in Wascana Park is wrong. It is unethical, it is short-sighted. It will serve Connexus and Brandt, not the public whose park it is. The public was left out of the decision-making process. The public forums that were held were mere window dressing. Wascana Park is a public park. It is our park. We have paid for it over the generations. As is well known, Regina has a surplus of empty office space downtown, a perfect location for Connexus. Why would the city of Regina violate its official community plan and allow Connexus to take 2.6 acres of green space in our park. I call on the mayor and the city councilors to work together to support the motion before you, to reverse city council's earlier sanction of the business development in the people's beautiful Wascana Park. I quote from The Origin and Development of Wascana Center by W.A. Riddell. The Wascana Center Act establishes a unique organization which includes 3 participating parties: the provincial government, the City of Regina, and the university. All are committed to work together to preserve the area surrounding Wascana Lake as a beautifully landscaped environment in which government, education, cultural, recreational, and environmental activities can develop in harmony. I think we can all agree on one goal, that is the preservation of a unique urban green space. By preserving this park, we will be honoring those in the past who worked so diligently and with such heart to make this urban park one of the most beautiful in North America. We will also be honoring all those to follow in the generations to come. Bequeathing an intact park to them is bequeathing riches better than gold. In closing, I kindly request that the city clerk accept a printout of the more than 2,500 signatures of an online petition, signatures opposing commercial development in Wascana Park.
Thank you for that. The clerk will take that. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? There appear to be none. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation. Dr. Bill Elliott. Dr. Elliott, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you, Your Worship, and City Councilors attending tonight. By way of introduction, my name is Dr. Bill Elliott. I'm a family physician, recently retired, having practiced in Regina for 37 years, including over 2 decades at Wascana Rehabilitation Centre. I was chairman of the board of directors of the Canadian Automobile Association of Saskatchewan and the Canadian Automobile Association nationally, Canada's largest membership organization with over 6 million members. I chaired governance committees in both of these organizations and have much experience in governance review. I rise to support the motion opposing commercialization in Wascana Park, commencing public consultation by addressing governance and informing the provincial government of this position. I would like to begin by thanking City Council for putting voice to this most important issue. It is abundantly clear that Wascana Centre is Regina's best asset and must be properly managed for the health, welfare, and enjoyment of our community today and for future generations. Let me state, strong governance works when it is appropriately applied. It is puzzling to understand how a model that served Wascana Centre so well for almost 60 years did not serve its purpose for transparent public participation on the issue of commercialization now being undertaken in the park. Generally accepted characteristics of strong governance include a rule of law with fair legal frameworks that are enforced by an impartial regulatory body, transparency, responsiveness, consensus, equity, inclusiveness, effectiveness, efficiency, accountability, and participation. In the interest of time and the 5 minutes allocated, I will summarize, I will refer you to my summary of my working papers and refer you to that package for details, but I would like to highlight a couple more things mentioned in that package. The Provincial Capital Commission Act was introduced in 2017. This legislation placed the Park Authority within the Capital Commission. The province pledged to continue to update and adhere to the master plan that had been in place all these years. Even though this has been mentioned already, it bears repeating. Key to the act was a significant change to the committee governance structure for the park. Previously, the Wascana Centre Board had 11 members, comprised of 5 provincial government appointees, 3 from the city and 3 from the university. The new committee within the PCC changed to 3 representatives from the provincial government, granting only 2 other seats, 1 for the city and 1 for the university. The long-standing equitable representation model for the park, Regina's best asset, was eliminated. The checks and balances that had withstood the test of time were now gone. One would think a transfer of control or remodeling of governance and administration would have been openly and transparently debated. How could an issue that's so important and impactful to Regina's urban landscape occur with so little open discussion and community input? A comprehensive review of Wascana Park was done a few years ago, commissioned by the Wascana Centre Authority for the provincial government at a cost of $800,000. This document was never fully released for transparent public review. Why not? It's now stated this review was used as the basis for the provincial government takeover of Wascana. Really an expensive, comprehensive document reviewing the most important real estate in our city is kept away from the public. Surely not proper governance. In the Leader Post edition of August 18th, the Deputy Minister of Central Services, which includes the PCC, stated, "We love our park, and I think folks want to make sure the park remains a park. Every developmental proposal has to be submitted in writing to the PCC, and no future commercial enterprise is being considered in Wascana Park." The recent actions of PCC speak differently. In the last few months, we've seen disabled persons prevented from using the lake for short periods to learn to water ski, despite approval from the past by Wascana Centre Authority. There's been approval and installation of a large neon sign on the TC Douglas building as an art project, although this had previously been rejected by the Wascana Centre Authority as non-conforming. A protest campsite over political issues have been established on the grounds of Wascana Centre, and the Connexus and CNIB non-conforming projects have been approved.
Mr. Elliott, you have 30 seconds left.
If ever issues shout for good and proper governance with reasonable public participation, these developments in the park must be the catalyst which obliges us all to support this motion before us tonight. I urge you to support the motion, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Questions of delegation? There are a few. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Elliott, for coming forward and all of the work that you've done in the last many years, not only as a physician, but an advocate for the park. In your speech, you indicated that you have many years also. Your experience is in governance. And if you can just, with the non-conforming Connexus and Brant commercial projects, it appears that the governance model obviously failed. Just want to elaborate, how do we move forward?
Well, I think
what needs to happen?
Transparency is important. I think the issues that we're discussing tonight bear open vetting in public. When you take something that existed for 60 years and within a very short period of time, a policy and actions that have spoken for themselves and protected our park are suddenly changed, it doesn't speak to good governance. We've heard about public hearings being held in the park, and as I believe other speakers will be speaking tonight, the model of open and fair discussion and approval of these projects for non-conforming developments in the park was not followed properly. So again, I see this all as a failure of governance in the park. If we had done this properly, we would have had, as the previous speaker had said, relied on the community to have its input and gotten rid of the sense that it was done behind doors without public input.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Good evening. Nice to see you. I want to pick up on governance as well. So let's start with, you described the previous model at Wascana Centre Authority. Effective? Would that be a base mark for you as to what it should be for in terms of a board, shall we call it?
I don't know what the proper one should be. I certainly have a good idea when something isn't working. I think as citizens we accepted that this had worked for a long period of time, and I believe we all have an intrinsic trust in the institutions of our city and our governments. And people don't come out and speak against them until they feel that the institutions are not representing them in a proper manner.
Thanks. So you were watching a few debates here earlier on tonight. You understand that when it comes to a city, we have to make all of our decisions here. Now, you work provincially and nationally. Is that how it works at the provincial level for a government or a national level for a government?
I wouldn't come across as being an expert in all forms of governance. I have experience in governance, and I'm not sure what an expert actually is, although I've spoken to experts in governance, and it varies from place to place.
Right.
But according to my read on the bylaws and the policies that were in existence in Wascana Centre Authority, the proper governance was not followed. We also have evidence and sources that have told us that the projects for redevelopment of the park using the Connexus Centre and the Brant development were never approved by the Architectural Advisory Committee of Wascana Centre Authority. Somehow, after the Wascana Centre Authority was taken over by the Provincial Capital Commission, these projects have been approved by the Provincial Capital Commission, although the Architectural Advisory Committee had never approved these projects. And we now believe the Architectural Committee of Wascana Centre Authority and subsequently the Capital Commission has been dismissed. So we do not know how, but again, whether it's right or wrong is not so much the issue, it's whether people were informed about it and allowed to participate in the debate, which they were not.
Understood. Let's assume for sake of argument that this passes tonight in some form anyway. What would you see your role, their role in the next step? I mean, if the city is being directed to do a certain thing, what's your role?
Well, as I said in my presentation, this is one of the most important pieces of our city. Everyone talks about it. At the golf tournament this weekend, everybody talked about what a beautiful park. The pictures you saw on television showed golfers over the conservation area of Wascana Park. People love this. What we should have is an open discussion above boards for everybody in the city to participate. Maybe it will result in a vote, a plebiscite. I'm not sure where it'll go, but nobody could support that this issue has gone the right direction when we go to having a fair representation on a Wascana Centre Authority board to having a majority opinion represented by 3 elected politicians in the provincial government making municipal decisions for what happens to the land within our city.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Councilor Bryce?
Thank you. You mentioned the public hearings in the park. Did you go to any of these public hearings?
I actually did. The first hearings, I got involved in this approximately 2 years ago in August when my wife were doing our 5-kilometer walk around the lake, which we do several times a week. And we saw scaffolding outside the College Avenue campus. And it might surprise people to know that we actually, people who are in the no commercialization of the park, actually do support renovation and reconstruction of the College Avenue campus. It was this particular deal that we're not supporting and the way it was brought in. So I saw this scaffolding, and about a day or two later I saw an advertisement in the paper from Brant Industries that they were having a public meeting at the CNIB about this project, which was kind of unusual because the public meeting said it was on a Wednesday night in the middle of August at 5 p.m. and you had to RSVP to go to a public meeting. So I did all that stuff and went to the public meeting, and when we got there, it wasn't really a public discussion. It was more of a developer's presentation of what they were going to do. There was 25 minutes of the architect's presentation, 25 minutes on the history of the CNIB, and 10 minutes left for questioning. And although I can't confirm this, it seemed like most of the questions were prepared in advance for the thing. I did manage to ask a question about commercialization, which was never answered. What percentage and why we have to build an 80,000 square foot building to replace a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot building that provided a service to the community. And that was never adequately answered.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing...
One more thing. I did watch the hearings that the university had about development of the Connexus Centre on YouTube.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is you don't feel like you had input for this public meeting. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't quite hear your question.
You don't feel like you had input into the decision that was made, even though you were at the meeting?
I don't feel there was enough following the, well, first off, yes, I suppose the short answer to that one is yes. I don't think anybody in the city had to. It was, I mean, we were bombarded with statistics like thousands of people were surveyed by the university that this project was to go ahead, and to me it was the same as if the Rough Riders had surveyed their season ticket fans and asked if we should build a new Taylor Field. They'd say 100%, sure, why not? I don't think there was an open discussion about it, and I did catch the City Hall meeting when the land transfer for $1 was approved in 2016, and it was a group of strong supporters of this issue, but I didn't see anyone that spoke against the motion or even had a really good opportunity to do this. I just don't think it was transparent. This is such an important issue for our city.
So, thank you very much for all that. Have you also been in contact with anybody from the provincial government to tell them how you feel about this?
Provincial government, ooh. In what capacity? Are you talking about elected politicians, or are you talking about people like deputy ministers, people who work in government jobs?
So you mentioned in your submission about the 3 representatives from the province that sit on the commission.
I have not addressed any of them personally, no.
Okay. And then I'll ask you with your response there. So have you talked to anybody from the provincial government, the deputies, the list that you just gave me?
Have I talked to any of the 3 representatives that now sit on the Provincial Capital Commission about this project?
No, anybody from the provincial government about what's happening in the park?
I've talked to federal government. I've talked to municipal government. I'm pretty sure I have, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But I haven't made a formal delegation, like written a letter to them in specific. Although other members of our delegation opposing commercialization of the park have been in contact and shared those experiences with us.
Great. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you and welcome. Can you explain what your term is for non-conforming buildings? What's your perception of that? When you say non-conforming buildings, what does that mean to you?
I can read it to you if I can get my notes out of my bag over there.
Okay. No, that's fine.
I think there was established, if you read through the Wascana Center Authority, and the previous speaker has spoken to that already, the purposes of recreation, conservation, education, and 2 others, I can't remember them off the top of my head. But what they were talking about was a large, diverse board of directors was able to interpret for almost 60 years what exactly that meant about preserving the park. Like, you could design the most beautiful airport in the world, airport terminal in the world, but if you put it in Wascana Park, that wouldn't be appropriate for Wascana Park. So I think some common sense has to apply to this.
Okay. Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, you made a comment that you were not happy with the process, the way it went. Are you not happy with the process, or are you not happy with the building that's going there?
Well, I'm speaking tonight on a personal basis. That's my opinion. I think what I tried to put out was, in my opinion, is no, I'm not supportive of the development that's going on with Connexus or CNIB, but that's opinion, not fact. I think what I tried to get across tonight was there are plenty of facts evident that the proper process of proper governance wasn't followed to allow these projects to
So
go
the
forward.
process, you think, failed?
Yes.
In your opinion?
Yes.
And yet, you said that you walked by the place 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And knew of it, and knew what was going on and found out about it, right?
No, I went in and found out about it because I saw scaffolding upon the College Avenue campus. I didn't have any knowledge at that time of the Connexus deal.
Yeah. So let me just ask you this. 8 years ago, we went through a process to redevelop the Safeway store on 13th Avenue. And there was people in this room that were mad, didn't want it. Let's bring up this building now 3 years down the road, this Connexus building. If I went back to the area of Safeway and we said we're taking it out, they would probably raise more cane than they did when they were trying to stop it from coming in. Do you not think that that would give this building, with all the stuff that's going on, would it not enhance the park enough to make, in your opinion?
No, my opinion would be, if I had a patient that we had to amputate their leg, they would adjust to it. They wouldn't like it, but they would adjust to it. They would really have a tough time adjusting to it if you would take it off the wrong leg.
Oh, absolutely.
If the leg was never supposed to be amputated in the first place.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, there was never any intention to have a tractor company or a large commercial bank building within our park. That's never been there. We had the urgency of a deal that needed to be made, and we need financial pressures that were being put upon the people in positions of power to get a deal done. But if they'd gone to the community, in my heart, I just believe the community would have rejected what we had.
Okay, no, it's a good opinion, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other speakers, other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll move on to our next delegation. Jennifer Soranis, I hope. Yeah, you'll correct me, I know that as you come up here, so apologize for that. If you could identify yourself.
Sorry for the long Greek name.
It's almost as hard as Fougere. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and maybe questions afterwards.
Okay. Your Worship, Mayor Fougere and City Council, thank you for the opportunity to come in and speak to you today. My name is Jennifer Sugrianis, and I'm here today to discuss my concerns regarding the development that is planned to occur in Wascana Park. I moved to Regina in 2001 from Saskatoon for work. Moving from a city like Saskatoon filled with miles of naturalized riverbeds, parks, festivals to Regina was at first a very difficult decision. What I soon realized was that Regina had a similar space in Wascana Park, just a few blocks from our home. I soon fell in love with the open spaces and took pride in our park due to its recreational, cultural arts, historic, and environmental importance to the city, myself, and my family. Research shows that cities thrive economically and socially and create a pride of place when consideration is given to 3 main drivers. According to extensive research conducted by the Knight Foundation, the process of placemaking is driven by cities' aesthetic appeal, its character and personality, and its inclusiveness. According to the Knight Foundation, a city that excels in these areas is attractive for new business, and in turn attracts economic and social growth. The Wascana Park natural spaces and mandated purpose for these natural spaces reflect each and every one of these placemaking characteristics. According to the mandate of the Wascana Centre Authority, the park is devoted to the development of the seat of government, the enlargement of educational research and development opportunities, the advancement of cultural arts, the improvement of recreational facilities, and the conservation of the environment. You can imagine my confusion and disappointment upon finding out that a large part of the park would be developed not for any of these purposes, but for a commercial business that shares none of these values outlined by the Wascana Authority. According to Ashley Martin's June 20th Leader Post article, lead architect James Yoke stated that commercial business already lines the park. This is false. The businesses that line up west of Dark Hall and surround the main part of the park include Dark Hall, a performing arts center, the Conservatory of Arts, Sask Music, Sask Film, CBC Radio, the Sound Stage, the Willow on Wascana, the Mackenzie Art Gallery, the Saskatchewan Science Center, Wascana Rehab, the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, the CNIB, just to name a few. Each of these represent cultural industries or publicly funded nonprofit organizations. Each of these organizations fit within the mandate of the Park Authority. They also enhance placemaking opportunities and the opportunities associated with it. Before I ask some burning questions, I need to voice my disappointment at the lack of open public discussion and transparency during the planning phase of this project. A project of this scope and importance, to the city should not be a one-off meeting in the middle of summer holidays. It should be an ongoing open discussion utilizing community consultants, neighborhood community associations, and other community stakeholders. I have a number of questions for this council. 1, in what way does the addition of this Connexus building and Brandt building immediately address the mandate of the authority and the state intent of this land? 2, why would a corporate business like Connexus not be leveraged to draw small business to the downtown area with its business incubation initiative, where there is a high need for new businesses in the already vacant buildings and lots downtown? Why is this best done in a park space? 3, what precedent does this set for future development of Wascana parklands in relation to corporate development? And lastly, how will the city better inform and discourse with the community on this issue? I thank you very much for having me in today. This is so important for our city, and I really hope you support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There may be, see if there's any questions of your presentation. There are none. Thank you so much for your presentation. You return to the gallery if you don't mind, and we'll move on to our next delegation. Deborah Carpa and Mikito Nishimura. If you could please come forward. Identify yourselves for the record, please. You have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
I'm Deborah Carpa. This is Michiko Nishimura. Okay. As healthcare providers, we're concerned about the commercialization of Wascana Park, and we'd like to talk about the many health benefits of park space and why we should not allow our park to be taken over by commercial interests. Parks have been shown to have beneficial effects for people with mental illness. Studies show that people living close to parks have less depression, less anxiety, and less stress. People with dementia have also shown positive outcomes by having activities in the park. Studies also show that green space improves blood pressure and cholesterol levels. This is not surprising, as high blood pressure is linked to stress and also to lack of physical activities. Studies also show a direct correlation between exercise and the need for insulin in people with diabetes. Public parks therefore provide an excellent venue for outdoor exercise. Green space cleans the air, which is obviously good for our respiratory system. One mature tree absorbs carbon dioxide at a rate of 48 pounds per year, and an acre will absorb twice the CO2 produced by the average car. We have had a hot summer, which will likely get worse with the effects of climate change. The surface temperature of green space is 10 degrees less of that of the street, which makes the actual temperature 1 to 2 degrees less than that of street temperature. This is significant on hot days in preventing heat stroke and dehydration. More park space results in less risk of heat island effect. Heat island effect creates toxic particles in the air, which has a negative effect on the respiratory system. Parks promote healthy development among children and provide a safe space for physical activity. Overall, park space improves the quality of life for the citizens in our city. An article in the Leader Post on July 23rd talks about the decline of urban tree cover in Canada. Several corporations are working closely with the City of Montreal to plant 50,000 new trees and plants in that city. I quote, "This concrete gesture is part of a desire to improve the health of the population." This is in direct contrast to the plans of Connexus and Brandt, who claim to be helping the community by cutting down trees to build office space in our public park. In light of the research showing the benefits of park, rather than destroying what we have, we should be developing more parks. People go to the park to get away from cars and office buildings because it makes sense for our health. We urge City Council to pass the motion, protect Wascana Park from commercial development. The prohibition on commercial development in Wascana Park must include Connexus and Brandt. There is no good reason for building offices in the park. On the contrary, there are many good reasons not to, including our health. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions from members of council? You were very clear in your remarks. Thank you so much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Florence Stratton. Ms. Stratton, you've been here many times before. You know the process. You identify yourself for the record, who you represent. Then you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Florence Stratton, I'm representing myself. A big thanks to Councillor Hawkins, Stevens, and Bresciani for their motion. I grew up in Regina and have many happy memories of picnics in Wascana Park. Who would have imagined back then, or even as recently as 4 years ago, that a motion calling for the protection of Wascana Park from commercial development would be necessary? Today, the need for such a motion is all too evident to anyone who has passed along College Avenue and witnessed the devastation that has been wrought in the Dark Hall area. There must be no large-scale development in Wascana Park. That includes no Connexus and no Brandt buildings in the park. Some people say an exception should be made for Connexus because of its $8.25 million donation to the University of Regina's College Avenue Campus Renewal Project. A Connexus building in the park will set a precedent. Just make a proposal that has a charitable ring to it, and you too can build in the park. Brandt clearly understood this when it applied to build on the CNIB site. Some people say an exception should be made for Connexus because it is a cooperative. An underlying principle of cooperatives is concern for community. Connexus defends the deal it made with the University of Regina on this basis. In the words of Connexus CEO Eric Dillon, we feel strongly that without an innovative partnership to help solve the ongoing financial challenges of College Avenue campus, that it might never be restored, or worse yet, having to be torn down. Clearly, we are trying very hard to achieve a much better outcome for our community. But is Connexus in the park a better outcome for our community? Even Mr. Dillon seems to have his doubts, as he prefaces his statement with the words, quote, "We have been very clear that we do not support commercialization of the park." What is in fact very clear is that the deal Connexus made with the university is a very good deal for Connexus. In return for its $8.25 million donation, Connexus got a 90-year lease on 2.6 acres of precious and priceless public land in Wascana Park. Some people say it is either lose park space to Connexus or lose the historic College Avenue campus to the Wreckers Ball. It is not either or. First, the University of Regina needs to take some responsibility for these historic buildings, which it allowed to deteriorate over the decades. Second, the Connexus donation is a drop in the bucket in relation to the annual budget of the university, which runs into hundreds of millions. Why didn't the university set aside an amount annually to restore the College Avenue campus? To help the project along, Connexus, acting as a true cooperative, could have offered a genuine donation of, say, $1 million, and thus provided a model for other businesses. Third, the university has made budget decisions which, in the context of the Connexus deal, are very questionable. For example, not so long ago, the cash-strapped university spent $1.5 million on fancy new signage, money that could have been used in the restoration of the College Avenue buildings. In short, the Connexus deal was not the only way to save the College Avenue campus. There were other options. Some people say the University of Regina's deal with Connexus is legal, and that makes it all right. The deal is legal only because there was a lot of deal-making involving not only Connexus and the university, but also Regina City Council, the Wascana Centre Authority, and the Government of Saskatchewan. All along the way, the public was left out of the decision-making process. The public forums that were held were mere window dressing. The various deal makers had no right to make deals that involved giving away Wascana Park. Wascana Park is a public park. It is our park. Only a referendum would make it right. Some people say the Connexus deal is a done deal. Construction hasn't started. There's still time to do the right thing. Some people say that because both Connexus and Brandt will be on the periphery of the park, these buildings are acceptable. These buildings will be in the park. They will be highly visible from major Regina roadways, breaking the hearts of many a Regina resident every time we see them, and sending out the signal that commercial development is welcome in Wascana Park. In conclusion, Wascana Park is in critical need of protection from commercial development. I urge the mayor and the city councillors to support the motion. We must all do everything we can to stop the commercial takeover of Wascana Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fadden, for your presentation. Are there any questions of the delegation? Once again, very clear in your perspective. Thank you very much for that. Next delegation is Jeannie Ma. Ms. Ma, if you could identify yourself for the public record, who you represent, and you as well have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Ma, and I'm here speaking as a citizen of Regina. I support the motion brought forward by Councillors Hawkins, Stevens, and Bresciani. Thank you very much for your work to protect Wascana Park from commercial development. Recent letters of outrage from citizens in Regina and across the country attest that, despite the university's insistence that public consultations were inclusive, few people were aware of the drastic changes until the chainsaws came out. No notice or signs in Wascana Park explained what was happening. Yes, 2 years after the public forum, people are shocked. I would like to mention a few irregularities and deliberate misunderstandings which have brought about this destruction of Wascana Park, which raise a few unanswered questions to stress the importance of passing tonight's motion. 1, the university offered the land to Connexus in January 2016, before the City Council land transfer vote in August of 2016. Did the university offer the land to Connexus before it was theirs to give? 2, City Council went against its own Design Regina official community plan, which mandates that all new major office buildings be built within the downtown core, that is, north of College Avenue. 3, the $1 land transfer from the City of Regina to the university to give to Connexus for a 90-year sublease is really a generous gift from Regina taxpayers to a bank. Will the City of Regina collect commercial taxes on this office building if the city no longer owns the land? 4, the Connexus donation of up to $8.25 million includes the value of the land, $3.25 million. The Connexus donation is $5 million for a 90-year lease. A bargain, is it not, for prime real estate at the entrance to our beautiful park? Connexus will rent out office space, recouping that donation in no time. 5, the Wascana Centre Act defines land use. Development can serve one or more of only 5 purposes: the seat of government, commercial arts, educational and research development, recreation, and conservation of the environment. Those who say that commercial buildings already ring the perimeter along College and Broad Street and even up and down Albert Street have confused a public institution, public space for the public good, for the common good, with a commercial building. 6, the Connexus head office will be an intrusion, blocking the introductory vista to the park. We will lose the view of the west side of Dark Hall with its bricks that glow warmly in the sun. Not only is this proposed building at least 2 times bigger in mass in relation to the existing rectilinear buildings, it comes right up to the road. All other buildings in Wascana Park have a green setback. This is a park. 7, the demolition permit for the conservatory building was sought 1 day before the first public forum, making evident that public concern was never to be heard. 8, when Vianne Timmons said that the road would be straightened, no one imagined clear-cut deforestation from College Avenue to Wascana Pool. We have heard that Connexus is paying for the new road and the removal of the trees. Would this cost be much, 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 much higher than the donation of $5 million? 9, that Brandt's head office will slip into Wascana Park under the guise of saving CNIB, a worthy national nonprofit institution, is a further breach of the Wascana Centre Act. Those of us who swim daily at Wascana Pool have witnessed the destruction of trees and the landscape throughout the whole summer. As we hear bulldozers, chainsaws, and wood chippers, as we breathe dust and diesel fumes, as lawn is scraped away and holes are dug, as we see the road coming directly towards Wascana Pool, we worry that recreational activity will be overwhelmed by business interests. We worry that we'll lose our beloved Wascana Pool. And on Saturday, there was a water main break, which forced the closure of Wascana Pool for the day. But luckily, the city did fix it. Will Connexus pay for that too?
Ms. Ma, your time is almost up.
We feel betrayed on so many fronts with our own money. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next delegation, Mr. Jim Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You as well have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Gallagher. I'm officially not representing anybody other than myself. Unofficially, I'm representing, I imagine, at least the 2,500 names on that petition that was handed in, and to the best of my knowledge over the past couple of years, many thousands more throughout the city. I'm a retired teacher. I am pleased tonight to be speaking to 2 of my former students, Councillor Bresciani, Councillor Findura, one of my former teaching colleagues, Councillor O'Donnell, and the parent of 2 of my former students, His Worship. I retired 5 years ago.
It's a small
I thought
world,
parent-teacher night was over. This is the Wascana Centre Act, cover page of the Wascana Centre Act 1962. I should say it was the Wascana Centre Act 1962 because in June of 2017, the government repealed the act with no public consultation, little debate in the legislature, and with no good reason or just cause for doing so, except to establish sole authority over the entire Wascana Centre, which by virtue of the 1962 Act had declared that the centre belonged to the people of Regina and was entrusted to the university, the city, and the provincial government for management and safekeeping. That arrangement seemed to work pretty well for 55 years. So well, in fact, that I recall only 3 serious matters to be dealt with in the park. The world's largest monkey bars, that after an excruciatingly long delay eventually became our Centre of the Arts. The shallow and rather unpleasant smelling lake that was rectified by the Big Dig of 2004, and the geese. We still haven't figured them out yet. The framers of the Wascana Centre Act 1962 displayed considerable wisdom in setting up an organizational model that saw a board overseeing the centre consisting of the 11 members, 5 from the government, 3 from the city, 3 from the university. Quickly do the math. No one of those 3 partners had a majority interest or control over the governance of the park. In fact, in their wisdom, the framers created a true partnership model, one that ensured no one partner could act in a way that might be detrimental to the interests of the citizens of our city. And they created a board that would have to make decisions through consensus. This was an example of sound governance, operating in a representative democracy and working the way that it should. But in repealing the Act in June of 2017, the government actually expressed a concern that the other 2 partners could gang up on the government and outvote them. This is from Hansard, by the way. Even though they had to admit that that had never happened in 55 years. Of course, if it ever had happened, it likely would have been justified and would have meant a return to the drawing board for a more acceptable result to everyone. The minister in charge then argued that the government was going to streamline the Wascana board to enable smoother operations. Well, they certainly did that. They streamlined the city and the university right out of the equation, enabling the 3 government representatives to vote as a bloc and overrule the city and the university on any matter they chose to. But in the process, they also stripped us, the citizens of Regina, from opportunities to publicly consult about the park through 2 local levels of government. Then the minister in charge said in the Assembly that the provincial government, and I quote, was assuming responsibility of Wascana Centre. Well, not quite. They assumed control, but they abdicated responsibility. Regardless of anyone's feelings about the TP protests in the park, the Provincial Capital Commission certainly doesn't seem to know how to resolve it. In fact, they can't even resolve a simple misunderstanding between disabled water skiers and rowers on the lake. This spring, they promised public consultations. Richard Murray, the deputy minister at the time, promised public consultations on the future of the park by the end of the summer. It's August the 27th. The deputy minister declared that commercial development already lines the perimeter of the park. Come and take a walk with me. That's nonsense. Then the minister and the legislature said that they did not plan to allow development that doesn't fit with the park's 5 purposes, except, apparently, a bank and a private corporate office building.
Mr. Gallo, you have 30 seconds.
The minister said they were committed to the plan, but the plan said that an architectural advisory committee had to approve new developments. That architectural committee did not approve those developments, and now it is gone. The motion before you, although not binding on the government, is a necessary recourse, and perhaps it is all that we are left with to try to prevent further incursions into the park that went against the wishes of the original planners and those who safeguarded it for 55 years. So I ask you to please support this, all parts of the motion, and to establish and to make public consultations a permanent fixture in the process of the future governance of the park, as permanent as the legislative building itself. It is our park. We need to have a voice. We have a right to that voice, and right now we need council to be that voice. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. There are some questions. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Gallagher, in July of 2017, do you remember a discussion you and I had about the possible implications that the new Provincial Capital Commission would create going forward? I was wearing a different hat, not my council hat.
You were working on our roof.
I was. A roof that you can see the park from.
That's full disclosure. Yes, I can see the park from that.
We discussed.
Watch your answer then.
Yes, we did discuss. I know we did. And if you were to ask me the details, I probably couldn't tell you, but I know I've had the conversations probably hundreds of times with others as well. Yes.
Right. And we talked about the implications before Brant was approved or any of these sort of things happened. And so we knew at that point. So I just wanted to point that out and appreciate your presentation. Did a very good job of the new governance model and when that changed and going forward. Thank you.
Was there a question in there, Councillor?
If you remembered.
Yes.
That's all. I made sure to start with a question.
Framed a new question, you're okay. If you don't, then not so much. Thank you for that. Councillor Stevens, you're next.
Thank you. Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming out. A couple questions. You've been digging into this issue for quite some time. Coffee shops, food trucks, restaurants, pubs, these are some of the commercial activities that technically exist or house in some capacity in the park. Is it your perspective that these type of enterprises should not have been allowed and should not be allowed within the existing buildings in the park? What's your thought on that?
No, not at all. I can't think of anything in the park right now that I oppose. As a matter of fact, any of those things that you have mentioned could be common to an urban park because they are intended to serve the wishes, the experiences, and the needs of the people who use the park. There are 3 restaurants in Stanley Park in Vancouver, but very little else. All of those things fit within the 5 purposes of the park that were outlined in the Wascana Centre Act and then were reaffirmed, I think it was at least 7 times in the master plans over the years. I also would like to add to that of course those are very small commercial establishments that really do serve people like us in the park. Not a bank, which has never been in the park, not a head corporate office for a huge construction firm, which has never been in the park.
Great, thank you. Through your worship, if I'm going for a run in the park, I'm cycling to and from the University of Regina, I will pass several offices. One is a Ministry of Agriculture, there's a Ministry of Health, which shares a structure with the Mackenzie. What's going on here? There are offices in the park already. What's the historical take on why they are permitted, and is there a difference?
Well, two things about that. Those were cleared, again, in the original Wascana Centre Act as governmental developments. The reason those are there is they actually all predate the 1962 Act, and I guess the simple response to that would be, I guess since the legislative buildings happens to have been plunked down in what is now Wascana Park, it would be kind of difficult for us to tell them to move. So that's not a problem at all. As I say, they predate the Act, and they fit the model of the 5 purposes of the park.
Great,
and no objection to that.
Thank you. Maybe I'll push that a bit more with another question. If you look at the 1913 Mawson Plan, the University of Regina is quite an impressive structure. Obviously, that never took place. So when we're thinking about Connexus, Brand, it actually doesn't matter who it is. Would you have any objection if the university was to realize that 1913 plan and extend radically, I think it's south, towards the lake, if it was a university structure?
Well, once again, if it is university-owned land, then the process that you go through would be a much simpler and much faster and expedited process in order to build on it. The situation we had was that the university did not have the land with respect to Connexus. The city had the land, therefore the land transfer, et cetera, et cetera. Going back to the Mawson Plan, though, I think that from 1913 to 1960, which was about the time that the discussions concerning the Wascana Centre Act started, that provided, it was almost like a long period of testing for the park. And many things came and many things went. There were actually residential buildings in the park, and they gradually moved out and other things evolved. When the Act was structured in 1962, it was based on, you might say, previously 50 years of research. This is what an urban park should be, considering that it has a kind of a tripartite structure to it, the government, the university, and the city. And so I think what we really should be referring to here is what was spelled out concretely in the 1962 Act.
Okay, thank you very much. Further to that point, near the University of Regina, in fact, pretty much right on the campus, there's Innovation Place. There's a cluster of office towers, buildings. What's your thought on that? Technically housed in the overarching Wascana Park structure, would that be something that would have to be prohibited in accordance with this no commercial development?
Probably good to clarify that that falls within Wascana Center. I think what a lot of people in the room tonight are talking about is Wascana Park, which is the boundary, I think, between Albert Street and Broad Street, College Avenue and 23rd Avenue. Nevertheless, Innovation Place is known as a research park, and they're across the country. The two main functions of a university, I know I went to one, and I actually sit on the Senate of the university now. The two main functions of a university are teaching and research. So to establish a research park attached to or adjacent to a university makes perfect sense. Going back to a question that Councillor Flegel mentioned earlier about non-conforming uses, you know, when you're using existing space for purposes for which it was not zoned, that's when you have to have discussions about things. That would not be an egregious violation of that. You know, to say that, okay, this is an educational area, but we're going to put a research facility or a research park into it. I think that makes very good sense, and no objection to that at all.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher, for all of the work that you've done. You've been an advocate for the park. One of the main concerns in bringing this motion forward, of course, is engagement and public consultation. You've expressed concerns about the lack of transparency in regard, to what has happened in the park the last couple of years. In today's paper, you wrote, there was an article there that you wrote, and I'm just wondering, in regards to the process, if you can just kind of give us a little more information about the architectural review. If you could elaborate a little bit more and explain that.
Well, partly in connection with what I had said previously, if a development were proposed and it conformed to the purposes of the park and in the areas of the park where it was expected and so forth, it would get early approval to move ahead. And then along the way, there would be reviews conducted by both an engineering committee and an architectural committee to make sure that it abided by the bylaws of the park or the guidelines of the park concerning the type of structure and so forth and so on. In this particular instance, and I did have to do a little bit of digging on this, it came to our attention, came to my attention as well, that the Architectural Review Committee, which is spelled out in the master plan as having a specific purpose, did not provide approval for the two most recent projects. I tried to find out more information about that. So I wrote to the Provincial Capital Commission on the middle of April it was. I received a reply 6 weeks later. I was told then that I would be directed to the executive director of the Provincial Capital Commission. I was then told that the architectural reviews from the past couple of years were confidential. Confidential, and that I would have to apply for a FOIP approval in order to get that information, which I wasn't terribly interested in doing. I would like to follow that up now, but as recently as of last week, both the deputy minister of that provincial capital mission is gone, and so is the executive director. So I'm not sure how to proceed now.
Thank you for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, one more question. Some people say commercial business already lines the park. It's on the fringe. How would you respond to it?
I've lived in Regina almost my entire life, with the exception of 4 years as a kid. I could not begin to tell you how many times I walked that park, walked through that park, run around that park, rode a bike through that park. I worked in the park. I went to school in the park. Come and take a walk with me tomorrow, anybody. We'll start on College Avenue, go south on Albert to 23rd, up 23rd to Broad Street back to College Avenue, up to Albert Street again. Bring your credit card with you. And let's see how many times we can use that card to purchase something. And I learned a long time ago that by commercial development and commercial enterprise, we're talking about the exchange and the trading of money or the selling of goods and products and so forth. And you could use your card in the Museum of Natural History gift shop. the Mackenzie Art Gallery gift shop. You could rent a canoe to take it out on the lake. That's what a lake is for, to take it out. You could stop and have lunch at the Willow Restaurant, which was actually originally built as a component of the park by the Wascana Center Authority itself. So I'm always perplexed. In fact, I sometimes yell from my sofa when I hear people saying on TV or in the news that there is already commercial business in the park. Well, yeah, there's that type of commercial business. There wasn't a bank, and there was not a head corporate office.
Again, thank you for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other questions of the delegation? Just on a point to clarify, and I'm just going to suggest that you wouldn't mind if we confirm that, that in fact the Architecture Advisory Committee of the Wascana Center Authority Board and the PCC is active and has reviewed these files. We'll check that and get back to you.
Oh, you'll check that?
Yes.
Okay, good luck.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, we'll find out. We'll let you know that real soon.
Thank
okay?
you.
Good. Thank you for your presentation. Next delegation is Anna Gaudikiotis. If you could come forward and identify yourself for the record, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes as well for your presentation.
Good evening. My name is Anna Gaudikiotis. I'm here representing myself. I am also a resident of Regina, a member of a family business, deeply rooted in the community for over 55 years. Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor, Foucher, honorable members of council, ladies and gentlemen. I fully support the motion on the floor regarding the protection of Wascana Park from future commercial development and a review of its governing structure and bodies. I strongly encourage City Council to support the motion as presented, and I thank Councillors Bresciani, Stevens, and Hawkins for bringing it forward. Almost 2 years to the day today, a significant exception to city policy was made with the decision to transfer land just west of Dark Hall to the U of R to allow Connexus the preferred high-profile site of choice for their offices. In so doing, the official community plan of Regina, including the office development policy, was violated. For a small business with a long memory of the decline and stagnation of a city center just a few blocks north of College, decades ago, these policies represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity to carve out a vibrant future and were legitimized as a product of extensive public consultations. The facts were in on the spiraling costs of sprawl to our city, and citizens made the connection that a vibrant downtown is essential to a healthy growth plan for our city. So it's exceedingly disappointing to see them being overruled. For developments allowing private offices of this magnitude to be built in the park when there are plenty of commercially zoned spaces readily available that would not displace recreational or natural green space from citizens. A dangerous precedent, one that may not be reversible. It's on its way to being set in allowing such projects with no adequate public input or accountability in place. Such future developments stand to hurt not just downtown, but the broader community in the long term. As you've heard tonight, research is constantly piling up on the benefits of our green space, and it's an endangered concept in our world overall. That a policy flip-flop could happen so quickly with so little public awareness also sends a chill and a negative perception of the city to other entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized segments of business, looking to invest in local community, looking to the signals set forward through these policies, without extracting a pound of flesh from the public. For what it's worth, I'm not as certain that my late father would have made the same reinvestment decisions regarding the Victoria Park streetscape a decade after restoring his heritage property, upon seeing policy exceptions being made so quickly and this surprising new direction to add large-scale commercial uses within Wascana Park, right next to downtown. Yet, as city planners had repeatedly told him, his was exactly the kind of investment the city wanted to encourage from small to mid-sized entrepreneurs that positively impacts the community. It's private money, private risk, neutral to the public interest. Why, when there are so many brown spaces all over the city and commercial vacancy rates are at highs not seen in over a decade, has the door been open to commercial development on our prized and rare urban park space in Regina? Why has any public forum to discuss these issues not been initiated by a neutral party looking out for the park itself? I believe it's directly a result of the provincial government body unilaterally inserting itself into civic matters regarding our park. Unless the city speaks up to represent citizens' interests, the park's future remains one of ad hoc, commercially driven development, not based on any consideration of the general public or broader community interests. Until a new governance structure takes public input and accountability seriously, the province will continue to operate Wascana outside of zoning ordinances, land use plans, and out of step with the local economy. As we have seen, they've exerted carte blanche over the park projects so skillfully handled to date.
Ms. Cordiculos, you have about 30 seconds left.
Pardon me?
You have about 30 seconds left.
No matter which political party is in power, park oversight must ensure that it cannot be used by politicians for four-year election cycles and short-term budgets. It's time to learn some lessons here by examining world-class parks like Stanley Park and how they employ best governance practices. Situated in the hottest real estate markets in Canada, imagine the temptations and the sales pitches they've been hearing. I urge the city to make the right decision for the park's future and its governance structure. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much for your presentation. To see if there's questions from members of council. I think you're okay. You can return to the gallery, and we'll invite our last delegation here to speak, Dr. Vian Timmins. Dr. Timmins, for the record, if you could state who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation as well, and there may be questions of members of council afterwards.
Your Worship and members of City Council, on behalf of the University of Regina, I want to thank you for the support you continue to demonstrate for our institution, especially Congress, which we just finished 2018. I also will thank you for the opportunity to speak to this motion, and I hope that you will ask me questions to deal with some of the concerns raised by the protesters, for example, the trees in the park. For every tree that will be removed, there'll be 3 full mature trees planted. So there's some things I can absolutely correct. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to this motion. It's one in which our university has a strong interest, and judging from the amount of discussion in the community, it's one in which everyone in our city has a strong interest. I want to begin by acknowledging those who have been protesting against the university's partnership with Connexus. I have corresponded with some of these impassionate and caring protesters and spoken with many of them in person. Although they do not agree with the university, and many others in the community who see a partnership with Connexus as the only way that we could have saved our historical campus, we all agree on one thing. We love Wascana Park, and we do consider it a gem in our city. Clearly, it must be preserved and enhanced for further generations. And that's why I and many others advocated so strongly for over the past decade for the revitalization of College Avenue and Dark Hall, which has been an iconic part of what is now Wascana Park since the early part of the last century. Through this revitalization, the renovated college building is now open, accessible, vibrant, and safe environment for 800 learners in our community. And Dark Hall will once again be Saskatchewan's premier historical performance venue. And I thank you for your support in making that happen. Now I want to speak to the motion on future commercial development. I have to speak against this motion because of the university. We are the biggest developers in the park, and we have to continue to educate the next generation of leaders in our province. We have to undertake development on our campuses from time to time, as we have always done. The University of Regina is above all a place for teaching, learning, and service to the community. But the scale of our operations and student population makes it the size of a small city. We need to develop and enhance our facilities to meet growing and demanding needs. Development is not our primary focus, but it's been part of our existence for decades. We provide food, housing services, gym facilities. We are an economic driver, generating approximately $500 million in provincial GDP annually and bringing thousands of students from across the province and the world to study in our city. We're able to do this because we develop We develop our campuses on Wascana Park. We develop in areas such as Innovation Place, residences. These are all part of the educational operations in the park, and they help us generate revenue to continue to provide the best learning environment for our students. In closing, I'm proud how your university has grown from what our first president, Dr. John Archer, called a rugged brat that squats so starkly in the southeast environs of the city to an institution that's a critical part of the city's educational, cultural, and economic landscape. Our ability to grow will be seriously limited if development of any kind is not allowed in Wascana Centre, where the university's main campus is located. We need to continue to construct residence, expand food services, or develop new recreational facilities. These are developments we've undertaken for decades with the blessing of and for the benefit of our city, and we must continue to do so in the future. So for these reasons, on behalf of the university, I respectfully must speak against this motion, and I thank you for your time, your consideration, and your long-standing support of your university.
Thank you very much, Dr. Timmons, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Okay, we go to Councillor Massanelli first.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I noted in your presentation that you referred to the university as much like a small city on itself. Since becoming a councillor, one of the things I've been made aware of is sprawl, of course. I was aware of it before being a councillor, but it's really come to a point. You can't continue to sprawl out. In your campuses, do you suffer the same problem? As you develop your infrastructure coming outward and outward, wouldn't it be something that you'd be working towards in your campuses going upwards?
Well, we have to comply with the Wascana Centre height restrictions, so we have to be very careful there. We got exceptions for our residents. So we are managing it as carefully as we can.
Okay. And I guess there again, it is infrastructure you're dealing with. What's the state of the infrastructure at the university? Do you suffer much the same problems we do in the city, or have you guys been on top of things for the last 100 years?
No, very much. Actually, College Avenue campus was our most serious deferred maintenance project. And we were at the point where we were looking at whether, when we would have to decommission it. And so for us, so we always have deferred maintenance challenges. We have roofs that have to be replaced. We have water systems that have to be improved. We're just doing some work on our heating plant. So we do have the infrastructure we must repair all the time.
And I guess that's more to the point is going through this. As we do our infrastructure as the city, we try to encompass building from within. I hope you guys take that kind of a view in the future at your campus as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor O'Donnell, you're next.
Thanks. Good evening. So I'll give you a chance to respond to a few things that I've heard tonight. Let's start with trees. So how many trees went down? How many trees are going up?
So the trees that were removed were ones that the Wascana Centre staff said had to be removed. If we could relocate a tree, we did. So we did not actually cut down any trees that the Wascana Centre did not tell us had to be. And for every tree we cut down, Connexus is planting 3 trees in the Wascana Park. So there's a net increase of a significant number of trees.
I will help you. I believe there was 37 trees that were taken out of the ground by a special tree spade and put in.
Yes.
And so are these 3 to 1 trees going throughout the park or just in the area along College?
Throughout the park, my
Thanks.
understanding.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between Connexus and the university. And in terms of what did the money do for you? What did it allow you to do?
So the money, people say that was just 8.5 they could have donated, but it actually leveraged federal money to help us we got $30 million federally to be able to work on it. The university has put significant amount of its own money in also. We tried to raise money for College Avenue. I tried for 5 years in this community to raise the money. I tried so hard, and we were not even able to raise $20 million. We actually were not able to raise $10 million. So the community did not come forward at that point. So that's why we had to go with this innovative project. The other thing is Dark Hall. Connexus is helping us with over $10 million of costs to renovate Dark Hall. So that is significant. So there are all kinds of benefits that the Dark Hall and College Avenue have seen from this partnership. So it's not just the $8.5 million. That's limiting.
Thanks. So just so that I understand, I've heard the number 8.5, and now I've heard the number 10. Are those separate?
Yes.
Would that become 18.5 then?
Yes.
Okay. There is a parking lot in behind. There is a street being changed. And I think I even heard of a pipe in the ground that will eventually go to the pool. Who's paying for that?
Connexus is paying for that. And the street itself is actually being fixed and lights put there for safety reasons. So it's a very positive attribution that we were required to do for the city because that intersection was not safe. It was dangerous. Also, the water to the pool now will have better water pipes. And so there have been significant other improvements.
Is the city of Regina paying for that pipe?
No, the university, Connexus is.
Thanks. So in the master plan, one of the places that I note is from the current university site in the southeast corner, there is the potential for development across the highway, across the ring road. Is that part of why you're talking about development or commercial development? And if so, could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, you know, we have been approached to consider, for example, a senior's home on our campus. You know, that may be something we want to look at in the future. Not now, we have no interest. A senior residence of people who actually study at the university, so they would be students. But we are looking, we have land by SIAS, the old SIAS campus, also where the community gardens are. We also have many, now, we have one of the highest percentages of parents, single parents who attend a university in Canada. And housing, married quarters is a real need for some. So we may have to look at that in the near future. We are constantly thinking and looking at how to serve our students and our community better.
Thanks. So there's Dark Hall, there is a renovated College Avenue campus. I believe you're moving in there now as we speak. I think you still have land along the College Avenue area. Do you have any plans along there?
Not at this time, we do not.
Okay, good, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Good evening, Diane. A couple questions. The first has to do with the definition of commercial development, and I hadn't thought about it until you spoke. No one I've spoken to so far has had any issue with the expansion of the university's footprint. So just to clarify, when you're thinking of our intention here, do you think of any building of a university structure to mean commercial development?
Well, residence means commercial development in my mind. It actually is, it has to pay for itself. We charge students residents, it's like an apartment building in my view. So I understand that people say there are different definitions, but I don't want someone else defining for me what is a commercial development at the university. And that is my fear with this motion. Of course, we don't want, a gas station right in Wascana Park. No one wants that. But I have to, as a university, and we are the biggest developers in the park. We have to have the autonomy to make sure that we are not imposed on, and that it doesn't impose on our development, ability to serve our students well. So I hear very different definitions of what commercial development means. So I'm nervous about this motion, very, very nervous.
Thank you, that's helpful. Another question has to do with other sections of the motion. So certainly there's a discussion here about commercial development, preventing future commercial development, but there's also a component here that takes a critical look at the governance. I'm curious about your thought on that component of the motion. Should the city take a position on the changes of 2017, and would you be supportive of a public engagement process that examines the governance structure as it exists now?
We wrote a letter to the government when the new governance structure was presented, asking for additional representation from the university on the PCC. So yes, that's on record.
Okay, thank you. So a follow-up to that would be, there would be some value in City Council joining you publicly in that chorus here that says that we want to have a position and to engage in public consultation about where we should be going.
My understanding is the city also had the same letter that went in. So absolutely, I support it then, I support it now.
Thank you. Final question. Vian, I mean, there's no secret in terms of the struggle the university, like other universities, have gone through in terms of raising money for capital projects. in your mind, the RFP that went out, that Connexus answered, is this a symptom of the province not sufficiently funding university infrastructure?
I think it's a symptom of our times, and I think it's very challenging right now for universities to get funding for infrastructure, whether it's through fundraising, which I told you we tried for 5 years to raise the money for College Avenue. I've heard people say to me, why didn't you raise the money? Why don't you use the university-owned funds? I heard today, why didn't you use the amount, I don't think it was over $1 million that we used for signage. We never spent over $1 million on signage. That sign that everyone talks about was not even close to that amount. So there's misinformation, Andrew, that I'd like to be able to correct, and I would be willing to meet with the protesters, as they know, at any time to correct that misinformation. So having money for infrastructure for universities is a huge challenge for every single president and university in this country.
Agreed. I fought over that sign budget at the bargaining table. I don't want to go down that road again, but I think the provincial funding component here can't be ignored when it comes to why we're looking at private corporations.
We're not debating Councillor Stevens here, just asking questions. Thank you for that. Councillor Flager, you're next.
Thanks. You want to come up? You shut me
That
off.
was me. Go ahead.
Okay. Welcome to the council chamber. So what about the trees? You told me to ask about them. You've asked. But I do have a specific question. There is a tree in the city of Regina that is called a black ash or a dark ash that we need to get out of this city because it's bringing beetles. I'm
We
understanding
remove those trees.
my understanding is that a lot of those trees were in that particular area.
Yes. And for every one we removed that needed to be, we've planted 3 trees. So that's, again, it's really important as councillors that the accurate information is in front of you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask the administration about the trees as well, but you forgot to mention, and I see what you're getting at about your point of business. ISM is a client of yours. That's a private entity.
Yes?
On your grounds.
Yes.
That's a business.
Yes, it's an office building just like Connexus.
What about the Paul Schwann Center?
Yes.
Private enterprise?
No.
No, it's owned by you, but it's open to the public.
Yeah, yeah.
It's open to the public. It's a
Absolutely.
health and wellness
And
center.
they pay fees, yeah.
And they pay fees. What about all the different businesses in the research center that are private?
There are many of them.
So those are the ones that you're more concerned with in terms of you building and growing your community.
Those, and Councillor, I'm also concerned about if someone decides to define commercial development as the stuff, as a residence that I want to put up, which they could do. And so that's what makes me nervous, because we don't have a consistent view of what commercial development is. We don't have a consistent definition.
Okay. How many full-time students do you have at the university today?
Over 15,000.
Sorry?
Over 15,000.
So more than the size of the city of Weyburn.
Yeah. And over 3,000 faculty and staff. So we're getting close to 19,000.
So now you're bigger than Estevan.
Yeah.
In an area, how many acres are you on? What do you
I don't
have?
know the number of
Okay.
acres, but
Just trying to get a sense. There's been talk about the lease with Connexus and whether you can disclose back and forth payment. I mean, you're giving them a 90-year lease. Are they paying rent within that lease?
yes.
The perception might be that they're not.
They are paying lease payments to us
They are paying lease payments to you for the next 90
for the
years.
9 years, yeah.
So they're not just giving
It's
it back,
not a
getting a
free
lease
ride.
for nothing,
No,
right?
and
Do they
it's
pay taxes, city taxes?
Yes, they would be required to pay city tax, property taxes, and that was, again, mentioned that they would not. They absolutely do.
Yes, thank you. One of the big things that I think that, and you've alluded to it with Councillor O'Donnell in terms of another $10 million, but my understanding was that the HVAC system on the Dark Hall was inadequate and and there was no place to put it. Can you explain what happened?
So all the mechanical now will be housed and with Connexus. So as they're building their mechanical, they will be servicing Dark Hall, which is a huge support for us.
What kind of money we're talking?
We're talking about 10 million, over $10 million.
And who's paying the electrical bill?
Well, all of that will be part of the Connexus contribution.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it seems to me that your organization, you couldn't obviously you mentioned through the city, come up. I think that's the total you were looking for was like $100 million.
The project was 70 million, and Dark Hall will be close to about 15 million. So yeah, about $85 million project.
So are you going to be complete when Conexus building is finished?
Yeah, well, we still need to raise 2 million for Dark Hall, and if people love Dark Hall, I'd love to see the contribution. But we will make it, we will get it done. This will be a legacy that, and I hope all of the citizens of Regina, including the ones in here, I hope you all come to the opening performance at Dark Hall, because it will be a legacy.
The building that is proposed, is it going to have public access?
Yes, it will have a public washroom access. It will have a space for public gatherings. It will have a cafe, which on the request of a Wascana Authority, they will be having a cafe so people can sit and have coffee and enjoy the park.
Some public parking as well?
Yes, the public parking. Now, Conexus parking is underground, so that it's not going to, their parking is there, but they will also be providing support for public parking.
Okay. Do you have any vested interest in the CBC building?
No.
That's not part of you at all?
No.
Soundstage?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just want to double check that, but no, I appreciate it.
I'd like to take them both over, but.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a few developers that actually want to take a shot at it too, so. But, no, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I'm going to use your words talking about deferred maintenance. We've also heard some of the other delegations say, why wasn't there something put in place to avoid the crumbling of the infrastructure that you have? And you've mentioned that there's other issues throughout. So, and it's hard to go backwards in time, why wasn't something set up? Is there something set up now so that into the future, so you don't have this issue into the future?
Yeah, so the parking revenue that Conexus is going to give us is now directly being going in to support College Avenue and Dark Hall continuing maintenance.
Thank you for that. But that's not the only building on campus that has maintenance issues, am I correct?
No.
So do you have a plan in place to deal with those ongoing issues into the future?
Well, we have deferred maintenance funds, and we just try our best to tackle each one as it becomes a priority. But it is a challenge for us. So no, we do not have sufficient funds for our campus to support the deferred maintenance. What we're trying is to make sure with the renovated buildings that we do have, that we find a way to support them like we've done with College Avenue and Dark Hall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. No other questions from members of council. Thank you very much, Dr. Timmons. You can return to the gallery. And
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, councillors.
So we have 4 communications here. One is from Ron Dorn, the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, Jim Holmes, and Donna Holmes. So I can have a motion to receive and file those 4 communications. Okay, Councillor Flagel, seconder. Councillor Bryce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move if you want.
Can we take a 10-minute recess? The appetite is there for it?
I'll ask if there's appetite to have a 10-minute motion. You've moved to a seconder for the motion. Councillor Massanelli. I'll call the question on a 10-minute recess. All those in favor?
Yeah. Okay.
Those opposed? Motion is defeated. We'll go forward. Okay. So we have voted on the communications. We have motion 10, which is on the protect Wascana Park from commercial development. Before I give the floor to Councillor Hawkins, I just want to make a general statement of context, particularly for members of the gallery to understand that the 2 projects that have been the underpinning criticism on construction in the park and commercialization in the park. This is not the forum to decide whether that is a valid project or not. That is the Capital Commission has decided that. The Wascana Center Authority, the predecessor, and the Provincial Capital Commission. So this council has no authority to stop those projects or start the projects. We are not the forum for that. The governing body is the Capital Commission. So you won't hear a lot of questions about the current state of each project because the administration is not party to that approval process, just so we're clear as to how we move forward. So just so everyone is very clear on that. I'm going to give the floor to Councillor to begin the process and ask you, do you want to close debate as well?
Yes, thank you.
You do want to close debate, okay. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The motion appears on the screen. However, Councillor Young has helpfully suggested to the three movers of the motion, Councillor Bresciani, Councillor Stevens, and myself, amendments to the second and third sections of the motion, and we're prepared to accept those as friendly amendments, and I wonder if it might be useful for us to put up on the screen the motion as incorporating the friendly amendments.
That would be it. So those are friendly amendments, so we don't need a second, we don't need to debate those, but I would like to have a seconder for your motion itself. So seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Bresciani. Okay.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I want to begin by thanking the delegations that have appeared before us tonight and who have been so persuasive in their presentations in support of our efforts to protect Wascana Park from inappropriate commercialization. I want to thank the residents of the City of Regina and beyond who've come forward in unprecedented numbers in defense of preserving our park as a nature park. Who would have ever thought that such a defense would be necessary, but it is, and our residents have spoken with a near unanimous voice in dozens and dozens of phone calls, emails, and approaches that people have made to me in the street. All have been in support of this motion except one. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues on council, Councillors Bresciani and Stevens, who have been the driving force behind this motion. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to work with them on this, and I would like too to thank Councillor Young for her amendments who have improved our motion. The motion before us is short, simple, clear, straightforward, just as it must be if our provincial government is to believe how strongly we feel about this park. At its heart, it commits our city to protect Wascana from future commercial development that is not directly intended to serve the needs of the park users, and it calls for full public consultation with respect to the interpretation of the governance and the master plan for the park. The words are not mysterious. They're meant to be given their ordinary meaning, their well understood meaning. But just so as there is no doubt, let me say what this motion does not do. It does not speak to the past. The past is past, no matter how we might like to change it. It cannot be undone. The motion speaks to the future protection of our park from commercialization. It is prospective, not retrospective. It does not prevent the sale of ice cream cones or kayak rentals or concerts in the park. What it does mean is that there are to be no more banks, no more office buildings, no hotels, no retail malls, no residential developments, no condominiums in the park. What can be ambiguous about that? And it does not stop the university from building residences or selling meals to students or carrying out recreational activities, all of which are integral to the educational function of the university, one of the primary uses for which the park exists. I'm proud to have served as the 5th President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Regina, and I have taught hundreds of students in the university. I would never put my name on a motion to protect the park if I thought for a moment, even a moment, that such a motion would impede the proper development and functioning of the university. It will not. This is our chance, perhaps our only chance, to protect the park. Because of recent government changes, all decisions affecting Wascana Park, including decisions on the interpretation of the park's master plan, have, for all practical purposes, now been placed in the Premier's hands. So my fellow councillors, Councillor Bresciani, Councillor Andrews, and I ask the following: that you give voice to the people of our city who elected us and for whom the park is foremost in their civic affections. That you keep faith with our forebears who gave us the park and entrusted us to pass it on as a special place to our children and our grandchildren. And that you seize the moment to make certain that Regina ranks among the great cities of the world that are defined by great urban parks. No vote, fellow councillors, that you will cast in this council will be more important than the vote you cast tonight to protect our park. We ask for your support for this motion, and we thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We do have other speakers. Councillor Murray, you're next.
Thank you, through your worship. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not as good of an orator as Councillor Hawkins, so I'll have my notes with me. But one thing that you realize when you get to this horseshoe and this seat is you realize there's a hierarchy of the issues that we talk about. Sometimes we talk about weeds in front of lawns, and sometimes we talk about the change of a land use in zoning. There's certain ones that you talk about that last 50, 100 years, and those are few and far between. This is also one that would keep you up at night, and that's something that I took a lot of time thinking about when I saw this motion. This is the kind of motion where you go to the park and you see the vibrance and the beauty of it, and you see people using it. So I'm going to stand in support of the motion as written and as it's been amended here. But I want to use this forum to say that the governance model that changed in 2017 is where we need to be looking going forward. And this is as council, this is as anyone watching on TV, anyone in the gallery here. You need to speak with your MLAs. It's very important because the sole control of that board of the PCC is determined by the provincial government. So whether your MLAs are NDP, whether they're SAS party, it doesn't matter. You need to talk to them and tell them how you feel about development in the park going forward. With that, I'm going to end that and be supportive of the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Through the chair, I really don't have much else to add that hasn't been said by the delegates so eloquently, and Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Murray. A couple observations. One, I have yet to see any issue receive such unanimous support and positioning ever. Certainly not a bylaw about shoveling your sidewalk.
That's true.
So I think that's actually quite an important reflection considering the consensus that is so rare has actually been achieved. And secondly, that Councillor Hawkins and I are actually on the same side of things here, and I'm considering maybe changing my vote now because I've been worried about this for quite some time. It's been an issue that was really dogging some of us on the campaign trail. Some folks have asked, why did it take you so long? And I think it really was both the support from the public, recognition that once trees are being felled, roads being dug up and so on, that the construction project is real. And I will reiterate what Councillor Hawkins said, is this is future oriented. And it's certainly not meant to prevent any of the services and amenities that people use in their daily activities in the park. It's not meant to talk about residences. It's not talking about curbing the growth of a public institution like the university, preventing coffee shops, ice cream sales, and so on. So that's actually a really important recognition. Commercial development, I think we've kind of gone around this a little bit. What does it mean? Well, we have definitions in bylaws, but I think Councillor Hawkins said it well, is that this is a very intuitive definition. But I do have a couple questions that emerged as I was digging into this a bit more, and I've been doing my best to read and understand how the dynamics of the park are managed. I still don't understand it in its entirety, and then things changed in 2017. So I'm hoping administration can help me out with a few questions here. what does our official community plan, and specifically the element related to the downtown office policy, what does it say about office space or commercial development in Wascana Park? Administration.
Ms. Folk.
Through you, Your Worship, as we've heard tonight throughout the conversation, the Provincial Capital Commission has jurisdiction as the planning authority for the park and the space that we know as Wascana Centre. We do have an official community plan, and like all of our other regional partners are partners that have authority for planning decisions that are not within the City of Regina's control. We can provide feedback through processes, however, do not have the ability to enforce such.
I'm not going to let you get away that easily.
Yeah.
One more question, please.
You bet.
If you'll indulge me. Office policy. What does it say about the current development south of College in Wascana Park? If this was another development of this scale, what would our existing policies say about that type of office space development?
In terms of, through you, Your Worship, in terms of south of College Avenue?
Correct, yes.
Yes. In terms of south of College Avenue, and of course, I'm going to refer everybody to page 43 within the official community plan, if you happen to have it with you. It's
Everybody's
quite,
got one, for sure.
Yeah, everybody. Everybody is quite prescriptive. So in terms of our office policy, we try to support downtown as the city's primary business center. We encourage that 80% of the total office floor space occurs within medium and major office space. Also, we try to ensure that there's a vacancy rate within that downtown corridor and within the downtown core of the city, and once it gets below that, we actually limit the ability for office space to be developed beyond that.
Thank you. A question about taxes, still a bit murky. How does this work? So we have a proposed building, Connexus, we have another proposed building, Brandt/CNIB. How does the tax structure work with buildings in Wascana Park/Wascana Centre, please?
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Your Worship, of course, the city does collect property taxes for commercial development within Wascana Centre. And in terms of the Connexus building, I have that number, projected number, based on the size and square footage at hand, and I can share that's $160,000 a year.
Okay, thank you. For both of the proposed developments.
Just actually for the Connexus development.
Great.
I don't have the number for Brandt.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
And that is, just to clarify, the municipal portion of that?
Thank you. I guess just a final remark here about, and I think this is quite telling, that philanthropy-guided commercial development has been seen as okay. And I think that's the big problem. And I think the issue with that is that public institutions are put in a situation where they have to look to the privatization and the commercialization of infrastructure as a consequence of poor funding from the provincial government. So I think we need to reflect on the context under which the University of Regina and other public institutions in this province are forced to turn to commercialization. The dilemma here now is that this is a requirement of public institutions. Without it, some might be put in jeopardy. So I think it's actually important that we recognize philanthropic guided commercial development as commercial development, and this isn't your way of getting in the door if you're a large manufacturer or a financial institution. So I'm asking for my council colleagues' support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bresciani, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, tonight I too want to say thank you to the delegations that came to speak tonight. Very important issue, but also with passion. And it's, I mean, to see how many people care about our park and love our park and want to protect the park. I also want to commend we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails and phone calls, but not just from Regina, from people across the province and Canada. This was a world, people in Canada, I was at the golf as well, and people stopped me and asked about what's happening with the park. You can't let this go forward. People are concerned. You know, for the last 60 years, the people have entrusted Wascana Centre Authority, and they've done a wonderful job. In the last couple of years, things have changed. And that's where the residents now are worried. This is where the concern starts. It's almost the lack of trust. And I had a resident last year reach out to me, well, a few, but one that really stuck with me, and he said, Lori, we elected you to be our voice. And it seems like no one's doing anything. And, you know, I kind of thought, well, I kept being told, well, you know, it falls with the province. It's their decisions now. And again, I want to say thank you to Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Stevens, because you're not sure if this is the right place to do it. But again, as elected officials, this is where we see the people. We are here from the people on a daily basis. And this is our job. I was walking home and going through College Avenue, and it was a day when I saw the trees were down. And it was in my own heart that I actually said to myself, how could this be happening in our city? I was almost blindsided. And at that time, I felt that I don't know what we can do, but I think it's the people's voice that need to speak. And we have that opportunity tonight. I like Councillor Stevens, had to do a lot of reading and ask a lot of questions on Wascana Centre Authority, but also how the Provincial Capital Commission has changed things. And again, trying to understand it all, but one thing came true. It was the lack of public consultation. And residents of Regina spoke. They were so upset with the lack of transparency. And they're not stopping. They're not stopping. There's still people picketing. There's still people writing from, again, across Canada that used to live here, that are very, very concerned. And the next question is it going to be an oil company that's going to come in here? Is that what we're going to allow? An oil company that's going to have their head office here? Is that going to be something that dollar is going to take our park away? And I hope tonight the answer is no. We are going to stand strong and voice that opinion to the Provincial Capital Commission that structure has to change. They call us partners. The university is a partner, the province is a partner, and the city of Regina is a partner. Would you ever go into a partnership when you've got 3 votes for the province, 1 for Regina, or 1 for the city, and then 1 for the university? I ask you, is that a partnership? Is it a fair partnership? As we move forward tonight, it's about moving forward. And I know what the people really want is to have a voice at the Provincial Capital Commission table. That's what they want. They just want a voice. And I ask, they want to discuss the future commercial development and the need for the governance structure that is fair to all partners and to be stewards. Tonight is our chance to give the residents of Regina, who have elected us, that voice, an opportunity to speak and share the love they have for their Wascana Park. Residents of Regina want to continue to enjoy Wascana Park as a park, not a business park, but a park. A true park of refuge, a retreat, to step away from the busyness of life, to relax, laugh, and gather in community. I ask that you be the voice tonight and support the motion for the people of Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barshani. Councillor Young, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to speak briefly about the changes to the motion, and whether this motion passes or not. We have to do with the provincial government, and so the changes are to strengthen our discussion when we go forward. So in number 1, we've changed park to Wascana Centre. Now we all call it the park, but Centre is its proper legal name, and it means all of the park, not just the green space around the lake, which some people think is the park, but that's only a small piece of it. Number 2, it says on behalf of City Council, not the City of Regina, because this is putting the heavy load of taking this to the government on council. And so council means government to government will be talking to one another. So that's why that change was made. And then at the bottom, that does not meet the recommendations in the master plan and has not undergone full public consultation. So that means that we would be looking at that master plan and that we would be talking about some way to have full public consultation on anything that might be other than just fixing a maintenance building that needs to be fixed. Number 3 is Bill 50, which is the Provincial Capital Commission Act, significantly changed the governance of the center. And President Timmons talked briefly about that. And so did others, that we only have one vote and the university has one vote. But that's only part of the problem that we have. It's the heart of the problem. But right now, the province could sell land in the park because there aren't enough votes to counteract that or to be some kind of a let's stop and take another look at this. So it's really important that council has the power here then to go forward and open conversations with the government. But we wouldn't do that alone. The 3 landowners should be sitting down together to look at that new act and what it means for us. So the university, the city, and the province should be talking together. But you should be involved too. And so that's why public consultation is there. We need your voice as well as our voices to tell the government that we need to do something to make sure that we sustain our park and that we make it the beautiful park that it is that we all love. So if this passes, we have work to do, and we will all have a part of that work to make this happen.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Bryce. You're on. Shows that you're on this one. Here, we'll do it again.
Again.
How's that?
Okay, I think I'm on now. Okay, I stand tonight to support this motion. I think that our forefathers and our foremothers were wise enough to put a master plan in place, a commission or an authority together to actually make good decisions to protect this jewel in the heart of our city. That's not happening right now. So that's why we're having to stand up and say, we're not happy that this isn't protected. We're not happy with the path that this is going down. The big issue here tonight is that this provincial committee was put together, this commission was put together, the Capital Commission, and we don't have a say in what's happening in the park or in the Centre Authority that, that we're all wanting to protect. So I think we also need to make a moving forward, saying we're not happy with the setup of that and we need to make changes in it. I think the voice has been heard tonight and I think we're part of that voice, but we need to make that voice loud and clear. So I appreciate everybody coming tonight. Thank you. Thank you for the letters and phone calls and everything. I very much think that this is a quality of life issue that affects everybody who lives here in Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you, and I'm not sure yet. I still have issue, but I'm reading some stuff from letters of the editor that go against what some of the people are saying. But I'm also, there's been a lot of misconceptions, and Ms. Timmons, I think, answered some of the questions, but I also heard that, I heard about unanimous support throughout the whole community. And I don't know where that statement came from, because there are people out there that are for development around the park. So there, I heard it twice tonight, that there is unanimous support in the community, and if it's even in this room, there isn't unanimous support. So not sure where that came from, but we're talking about things that are going on the peripheral of the park. We're talking about College Avenue, we're talking about Broad Street. We're not talking about in front of the legislative buildings. The problem I have with this is number one. City Council commits to protecting Wascana Center from future commercial development that does not directly serve the needs of or benefit those using the park. We just had Ms. Timmons talk about 10 probably businesses that run out of the university that built specific buildings to work out of those buildings in park space. What happens if the government wants to build a new Mackenzie Art Gallery, a new T.C. Douglas building on 3475 Albert Street? If they want to put another one, are we going to tell them they can't? It's part of that. It's all part of development. It's all part of growth. We have 2,300 acres. This particular building is going to take up 2.5 acres. Yes, it's going to chew into the park a little bit. What happens if CBC, as a nonprofit, as everybody kind of jokes about, what happens if they leave town? Are we going to say it has to be a government agency only? Can't be private development? Can't be private business?
Order, please.
Whose choice is that? Whose choice is that? It's a public building. If they sell it off, like they could, if the Navy building decides that they've had enough, they're not going to be there. There's another building. We have a lot of buildings. The soundstage was pretty much up for sale about 5 years ago. They pulled back on that, and now they rent it out to private people, to private industry, to people that want to utilize the facilities. I don't know that we're in a position, and I don't know what the movers on that number one, where are what's the teeth in that motion? We can say that we're going to commit to protecting, but what are we going to do if they don't? What if they don't listen to us? Partnerships are always great if you own 51%. The government owns 60, we own 30, the university owns 10. We don't have the hammer. That number one does not give us the hammer. That just gives us a voice that we would have anyway. So I don't know if I go along with the motion. I don't disagree with the motion, but I don't see that it has any teeth that is going to tell the provincial government to listen to what we have to say any more than they would today. There's 3 people on the board from the provincial government, 1 and 1. To me, that's majority rules. That's how we do it in this forum here. Those are some of the things. The tree thing I think we've addressed, and it's been out there, and we've seems to be it's a 3-to-1. We're not looking for the Connexus. I mean, now it's not 8.5 million; it's about $19 million that they're putting into this. And Ms. Timmons was mentioning that they were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million originally, and so that's 20% of the total bill that Connexus is coming up with, and they're still going to pay a lease on top of that. So they're giving the money, they're building the building, they're giving it back to the university, they're paying a lease, they're paying city taxes on that building, they're providing services of food, beverages, washrooms, facilities for everybody. They've somebody was talking about the closed Wascana Park. Well, we all know that that's a possibility down the road because we need to build a new one. So those are all park enhancements that possibly some of the infrastructure has been done by Connexus. So I don't know if I can support this motion as it stands because I don't see any teeth in it. All I see is words, and we have those words with the provincial government already. And as Councillor Bryce said, get out to your MLAs because they're the ones that have the hammer in this whole park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flegel. Councillor Ferndur, you're next.
Thank you, Worship, through you. I heard deep concerns about as you changed my wording to Wascana Center, is that the center could turn out something other than what it's intended for. So that concerns me. And the governance of the Wascana Center was altered. Well, that concerns me as well. There is passion. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of passion in a while here. That's charged. That kind of charges you, right? And being like Councillor Murray said about this horseshoe here, it charges you when you get audience and you got some passionate thing to do. Well, by communicating with the residents, I was told that do your part tonight, and we will deal with the government later. So we need to do our part here, and then you're going to go out there, and in your next turn you're going to have, you're going to talk to your government. That's what you're asking. That's what I heard. You say I do my part here to put my voice as a representative, as your elected official, is to tell the government that how I feel, and then you will deal with that part. So after all that, guess what? I definitely will be supporting this motion. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flake. Councillor Findero. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. Based on the comments I heard initially in reference to the university and the ability for the university to develop, then I become very interested in the motion. I know there were some whispers about a couple of things that my colleague was saying, and I wanted to descript a little bit about our role. I'm going to be a little facetious here, first of all. I don't know Doug Ford, but Doug Ford did me a great favor in the last while when he stood up at his legislature and said, I don't really like what's going on in Toronto City Council, so I'm going to halve the number of seats, or whatever number he came up with. I want you to understand the role between a provincial government and a civic government. And by the way, I can argue whether we're a government or not. We're more a corporation. But anyway, that's an aside. So if your goal today is to hand all of this over to the political role here to deal with the political role, then I think you missed the point. What you did is that you galvanized, you got together, you brought people together on a focused point. And so I'm just guessing, that somehow or other this motion will pass. If it is left up to just us, you know, that role between provincial, municipal government, I don't know if we'll succeed. But if you can galvanize a little bit more, and if you can go out to the public greater, and you can talk to the people that sit as elected officials in the provincial government, then I think you have maybe begun to succeed, if that's what you want to do. Now, you know very well that when you walk in here, you will be heard. All you had to do is say, I'm coming, and you stand here, and you listen. And by the way, you're on television, and these good folks beside me in the media are noting what you're saying. That doesn't work at the other order of government. That's my first point. So if you stop, thanks. Second point, I want to talk about governance a little bit. So I was one of those folks that sat on the Wascana City Board before, and like gentleman Jim Gallagher, I worked at the park, and I loved the park, because I sat beside a guy named, on his hands and knees, Joe Moran, and we planted trees. I could take you to the spot if you wanted to. I learned a lot. So what's the right way to go? If you change legislation without consultation, what do you think your willingness is of just to turn it over to the public or not? So think that through a little bit. The university, which, and I started my comments off with this, university in the master plan has land on the other side of the ring road. So does now SAS Polytech and so on, and they have plans. You can see that not only do they have plans, but they have a concept there. I support that notion. That's a good type of growth. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we all interpret this motion and what it means. We, on this floor of council, publicly, that is, we advertised it just like tonight was advertised. The media showed up and so on, and we did the land transfer for Connexus. We did it right here. And we did it in front of everybody. So if we make those decisions, I raised my hand, by the way. I want you to understand that. So that was part of a public process. So my last point is this. Councillor Young was correct. A lot of people that I end up talking to think the park is just that legislative area, the part where the pool is and so on, and where everybody walks. I want to tell you a little story. If you look in the master plan, you will see that there was a thought in there about what is to the very east, that we became concerned a number of years ago, and was part of the process when we were evaluating the whole park to say, all of that little bit of water that comes into the park is affected by all those things that go out there. We did not talk about limiting the park. We talked about expanding the park. We talked about how to look after that water and what was coming into that water as part of it. And that's why those people, Friends of the Marsh and so on, are very important, because we look beyond. All of the lands south of Sask Polytech, on the other side of the highway, those are all equal to and important of the park, not just where we all walk. Keep that in mind, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Massanelli.
My intention tonight is to support this motion. Having been in this job for almost 2 years now, barely got my head around how Wascana Centre Authority worked, and it was all changed. To try to understand how this came about, I think I got a little bit of a handle on it, but what I do know is if I don't see the transparency, you guys don't see the transparency. So I think it's my job to voice that dissatisfaction, so I will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Stevens, could you take my seat, please? Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I want to start by thanking the delegations, as all members of council have done, and I note the passion and the intensity of those who spoke and those who are in the gallery, who are wanting to jump at us sometimes and voice their concerns. And I apologize, but the rules are the rules. We try to keep decorum here, and that's an ancient rule we have. We just got to go through with that. So there's a couple points I want to raise here. The first one is obvious, that it's not just you that loves the park, it's just members of council and my administration love the park just as much. Nobody in their right mind would want to damage the park and take away the park. Now, there may be some versions that are different, and I'm not going to defend any position other than what I'm taking in just a few moments. But I would say we are united in loving the park. It's the largest urban park in North America. What defines us, it's right in the heart of our city. So everyone has a vested interest in protecting the park and ensuring that it continues on into the future. No question about that. But this motion is symbolic. A couple of delegations said that point blank, and it's actually true. We do not have the authority to direct the Capital Commission to do anything in and of ourselves. But that being said, we have the weight of this council to go back to the province and say, hold on, we want to see something different here. Our community is looking for a different direction. We're looking for something different. What is that? It's the first motion to talk about commercial development in the park. We want to stop that from happening. I want to thank Councillor Hawkins for being clear on definition of terms, so both council and the gallery, the public, our administration are clear on what we're talking about, what we're not talking about. This is prospective, not retrospective. A very important distinction. We can't undo the reality in front of us today, and nor should we even talk about it, because it's not our jurisdiction to do that. We talk about the master plan as being a decades-long document that has a life of its own. There are many, many people who are much more engaged in that process than members of council, and some of the delegations know a lot more about it than I think even the founding fathers did on that. But it is about a living document that talks about how we move our park forward. The university, very important that they continue to have expansion growth to meet their needs in the future. This motion does not take any away from that. So I'm going to support the motion wholeheartedly. I think it's a great motion. And I want to thank the movers for doing that, and Councillor Young for you, for me clarifying, because I was concerned about what commercial development meant. Was it prospective, retrospective? What are we talking about here? Those are very, very important for me. I lastly want to talk very quickly about governance. I chaired the Wascana Centre Authority Board for many years as mayor, and I don't sit on the current Capital Commission. I don't think I want to either, for that matter. That's a rhetorical statement, of course, but there is a difficulty that we face as a city and as a university, and that is the balance of authority within that organization. The province can right now divest itself of property when it wants to. It can change the boundaries without the approval of the city and the university, whereas with Wascana Centre Authority, we needed to have consent of all parties. The budgets that can be set by the province, they can talk to us about that, but they approve it. So I'd say we are like a junior partner. Maybe from the galleries looking on to the main event, we're saying, I hope we do something different here. So I'd like to go back to the Wascana Center Authority Board of Directors. We got a nice balance of authority and power there, because we all love the park. Everyone does. And we need to come to a consensus of how we go in the future. So I hear the bell ringing. I know my time is up, but I'm going to continue on for a second and say that I support the motion, and the motion directs me to write a letter to the province. I will do that and express deep concern about the future direction of Wascana. But we have many people who love this place here. We will ensure that we go forward in a way that the motion speaks about tonight. Thank you. You gotta learn how to turn it off.
I don't know how to turn it off.
Councillor Hawkins, you do want to close the debate. You have 3 minutes to close debate.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Your Worship. Why are we doing this? Councillor Young gave the reason, because we're going to take a message to government. Councillor Flegel wondered where the teeth were in this message. Well, the teeth are in the words, and the words are used by voters to convince government, and those are teeth with real bite. What we do tonight, Councillor Findura said, his voters said, you do your part tonight and we'll do our part later on. This is a powerful and meaningful statement that will have an impact. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making your voices heard. Thank you for inviting us to amplify those voices. We won't let you down. I call on the Premier.
Order, please.
I call on the Premier to hear your voices. I call on the Regina MLAs to speak for all of us. I call on the opposition to insist on transparency and accountability. If those things are done, we will have done our job to protect the park. Your Worship, I think this is a vote that people would like to be recorded, the councillors would like to have recorded, and I'd ask you to call a recorded vote on this motion, and I'm hopeful it'll be unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Councillor Bresciani, how do you vote?
In favor. Support.
Councillor Young?
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani, were you wavering there for a moment? Oh, I just wondered.
Councillor Findura?
In favor of the motion.
Councillor O'Donnell?
In favor.
Councillor Flegel?
In favor.
Councillor Murray? In favor. Councillor Stevens?
In favor.
Councillor Bryce?
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli?
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins?
In favor and support of the park.
Mayor Fougere?
Let me see. I vote yes.
The vote is 11-0, sir.
Vote's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Now you can clap. No, let's finish off. Let's finish off. Thank you very much. I'll wait for the gallery to clear, then we'll move on to 2 more items. Okay, let's continue on with the final two reports of before us. We have a committee report, the Regina Planning Commission, the park naming report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. May I have a seconder? I'll speak to this.
Second for it. Councillor Bresciani.
Thanks very much. This area of the creeks, the park currently right now is called MR3, and we'd like to change that name to Okamassis Park.
Could you say that again?
Okamassis?
Right, thank you.
Thank you. And this is a park from our list of names, and it is an Indigenous person who has done some very good things at the university, and this was welcome. So we would certainly like you to support this, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor O'Donnell. I believe the developers requested this is right. This actually comes from the developer asking for this as well on the official list names. Discussion, Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Your Worship. I rise in support of this. This is in my ward. I'm very proud and honored in the fact that this is an Indigenous woman, Jean Okamassis, and she was a real, an author, a writer, and a teacher of the Cree language. And so again, a leader in that way and in her culture. So again, I'm proud that that'll be a park in my ward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. No further discussion. I will call vote on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The last report is a tabled motion from last month. Councillor Stevens, this was we tabled this for more information related to the report, the bill before Parliament, C-312. The floor is yours.
This is a bit of a letdown. Everyone's gone. It's far less exciting than previous discussion. With cycling, it's probably of utmost importance, and through the park for sure. I'm hoping everyone had a chance at least to skim the legislation. It's pretty brief. Bill C-312 essentially is looking for the construction and advancement of a national cycling strategy. This really doesn't displace any form of authority or overstep jurisdiction. What I find really interesting about it, it's actually a way of linking municipalities, municipal regions with cycling infrastructure, our transportation master plan, and a federal strategy, and I think most importantly, perhaps giving some focus to federal infrastructure dollars. God knows when it comes to infrastructure money of this type, we're probably not going to see the best response from the province, yet I think we see some hope in terms of bridging federal support with municipalities. Just to summarize here, the legislation itself does 5 main things. It commits the federal government to set clear targets for the expansion of cycling-friendly infrastructure, encourages more Canadians to choose cycling as their mode of transportation, improves national safety standards and measures, supports cycle tourism in Canada, and increases education for cyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. And I think that's something we really need to talk about. It would add the city of Regina to a handful of large urban centres and small communities from around Canada. And hopefully we can build some momentum and get the federal government, maybe the province and municipalities together to talk about this.
So we need a seconder for this, Councillor Stevens. Someone wants a second? Councillor Massanelli, okay. Other speakers to this? Councillor Flagel?
Thanks. I guess what I want to know from the mover is what is going to benefit Regina? You talked about national this, national that, national. What's the benefit to Regina by doing this motion? I haven't heard that, so.
Councillor Stevens?
I think along with many other letters and public support that we might try to muster at this level, I think ultimately what this would do is hopefully bridge federal infrastructure money with cycling infrastructure and investment at the municipal level. It's certainly a long game, but it's actually about connecting those two and having cities join together to talk about the ways of focusing federal money into cities and small communities.
Do we know what, if the money was available, what kind of a plan would be in place if there was some money available, if that all worked out?
That might be a better suited for administration, but this
Okay.
is about sharpening where that federal money
Okay.
would go. Currently, to my knowledge, there isn't anything specific.
Okay, no, that's
Thank
all,
you.
I wasn't sure if there was a plan already, so, thank you.
I have a question of the mover on this report. I understand this is a private member's bill. It's not sanctioned by the government yet. Is that correct? although it's referred to as C or Commons 312, it is still a private member's bill.
To my knowledge, yes.
And it's first read in October 2016, so it's been some time. I won't get out of my chair to go over that. I'll just make a quick statement that I support this, but it's a private member's bill, and it has not been scrutinized by caucus, by the Ministry of Transportation, or anyone else. Not to be cynical, but there's a long, long way to go. The report doesn't talk about how to finance it, who's responsible for what. It's an aspirational document is what it is. So because of that, I'll support it.
Thank you.
Other speakers to the report? All those in favor? Oh, Councilor Marie, you gotta be faster. Or I gotta be slower, either one.
I was gonna say, I'm
Either
pretty
one.
short.
So you gotta hit that finger over there.
All right.
Councilor Murray.
I was just gonna say, you know, you're talking about long shots, I'm pretty short, but every now and then you can get a three-pointer, so.
Short shot.
Let's do it.
Could be a short shot? What do you mean? Okay. Okay, any other discussions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. That's the end of business. A motion to adjourn, please. Councilor Bryce, Councilor Massey seconds it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.